Good morning, colleagues. It is now 8 o'clock, and so we can go ahead and call this Committee of Appointments to order. I hope you all are doing well this morning. We have a number of resolutions for today, and then we also have some of the discussion and hopefully to build in some of the conversation pieces as well as we do, continued odd morning. So the first is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Kate Behrens to the Grand Rapids Building Authority. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and supported. This is Ms. Behrens, our Deputy City Manager, being appointed to this body. All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. The next is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Aaron Chapin Lewis to the Historic Preservation Commission. Do you have a motion?
Support.
It's been moved and supported, colleagues. Aaron Chapin Lewis, this is a reappointment, I believe. Daniel?
This is a new appointment.
This is a new appointment. Getting these ones confused. I think maybe because we talked about this one last year, because this had been a body where we had a number of people, and then there were a number of sort of retirements that we had off of that. Any questions, colleagues? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. Next is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Marlon Fyan to the Public Safety Committee. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
This has been moved and supported. Mr. Fyan is Commissioner Robbins' appointment to Public Safety. Just as a reminder, individuals, well, I think Mr. Fyan is in the first ward. I think previously he was Commissioner Jones's appointment, even though it was the second ward. So there's no residency required or no ward requirement. Mr. Fyan has served in this capacity before. He was also very actively involved with some other groups around gun safety in the past, and he's a previous business owner in the community. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
That carries, thank you. Next is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Jeffrey King to the Michigan Street Corridor Improvement Authority. Do you have a motion?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Mr. King currently works at the Rapid as a previous leadership role at Community Rebuilders and is filling the role of a resident on the Michigan Street Corridor. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. Next is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Benjamin Mallory to the Public Safety Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Mr. Mallory is a member of the Malloy, sorry. Thank you. Giving people extra letters in their name. Mr. Malloy. I should know. He's one of my constituents. Sorry, Ben. Mr. Malloy currently serves on the Neighbors of Belknap Lookout Board of Directors. He's been actively involved in their work around public safety and redefining public safety. He is working towards a master's degree in criminal justice at Grand Valley, and he has quite a bit of experience. His partner works in addiction medicine, is one of the leaders in addiction medicine at Corewell Health West. And this is Commissioner Knight's appointment to the body. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. The next is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of George Skentos to the Downtown Improvement District Board. Do I have a motion?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is this one of those reappointments, Daniel, as well?
This is also a new appointment.
This is a new appointment. Okay. Any questions, colleagues? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. That's all. Oh, we have one more. Sorry, forgot about this one. And look at Tim even showed up. Thanks, Tim. Mr. Bergman. This is a resolution recognizing multiple appointments to the Vital Streets Oversight Commission. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported, colleagues, so I'd like to provide just a little bit of oversight. But actually, Mr. Berkman, could you come up and just share with our colleagues today some of the work that we did last year to get to this point, and maybe just a little bit overview of the Vital Streets Board?
Sure, happy
Thank
to
you.
do so. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
So the Vital Streets Oversight Commission is tasked with basically overseeing how revenue is being invested from the continuing income tax that was passed around, was that 2014 or 15, in that time frame. It's a 15-year program. And so the VSOC kind of monitors our annual progress, develops reports that will come to you here later this year to report on our progress. And so last year, the body up until that point had been a 25-member board, and we worked to reduce that to 13 members. So that consists of 7 members specifically from the mayor and 6 commissioners, and then 6 from community-affiliated organizations that had been identified as organizations that would have, a good voice to add to the table or discussion. And so the 10 that are recommended before you here today are members that have served in previous terms and up until this point, and have provided great feedback and have been engaged. And so we're recommending that they be continued. You'll notice in the packet it does identify different dates on which they would end, because one of the issues we needed to develop and had been implemented is to have a staggered term, so that we don't have this, full board turnover. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. So yes, colleagues, I think one of the things is we always want to make sure that these bodies are worthwhile, that we don't have lots of vacancies if there doesn't need to be. And so a number of you'll see in the information, a number of the groups that, again, how many will be able to, there's 10 right now, and so it'll be another 4? No.
So we need 3 more.
Another 3 more, okay.
Yeah.
I knew that there was one that had dropped off from the last time.
Right.
So thank you for confirming that. So we still have the opportunity to appoint 3 more individuals. I would say this is certainly a group that we want some industry understanding, some contextual awareness, and then we also obviously want different voices. And I think at the start of this, that was much more important because it was a new millage, and we wanted to make sure that there was good oversight. I think it's been very successful, actually. The VSOC, other communities, I think, have come to us and asked us how we have put together this millage to, we were fixing the roads before fixing the roads was a tagline. So I think that it just shows the importance of infrastructure and how we can make sure we have community voice and infrastructure. So while we have 10 here, we still have another 3 that we can collectively appoint or provide some feedback to. Yes.
What was the name of the millage?
So it's the Vital Streets program. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, and I think it was 2015 because I think we probably did it in an odd year.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't here, but I remember being part of maybe a committee.
Right.
Please tax me. All right. Any other questions, colleagues?
I do have a quick
Commissioner
question.
Robbins?
Yes, thank you. Could you share some examples of the backgrounds of current members on the committee? I guess what would be helpful to have represented?
Yeah, so we do have a representative from Grand Valley Metro Council. That's the metropolitan planning organization for our area. The Rapid, MDOT, Monday Group, Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc., the Mobile GR Commission, and West Michigan Environmental Action Council. We do have somebody that's going through the process right now that has applied from Disability Advocates, which I think will be another great addition. So that will likely be coming before you in a hopefully soon meeting. Yeah, there is a list of organizations that was intentionally developed when we went through the process at the onset of developing the VSOC. And so we said we would maintain that list, and as others, make sense to add, or sometimes organizations cease to exist, we said we put that under the purview of the Vital Streets Oversight Commission to kind of monitor that list and suggest, who would be a good organization to pull someone from.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I add one other thing? I also think some of the groups that are noted that may not have a current representative, Mr. Berkman, I think, and others in your department had gone to those individuals.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, there was a lot of leadership changes. A number of those community-based organizations, some of them are not existing in the same way that they previously did when the millage started.
Right.
And so I know that there were a few that just said, at this point, we're unable to put forth somebody to be on the committee, but certainly if there major pieces that we would be changing with the millage, which I don't see that happen. There would be robust community engagement at that time.
Right. We did go to each of the organizations and do that intentional outreach. And one of the things we committed to was providing better updates and regular information for those organizations that some are very small or don't even have full-time staff. So to be able to commit someone was difficult, but we said we'd make a more robust effort of keeping them engaged and aware of what the VSOC is doing.
Great. Hearing no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you for your work, Mr. Berkman. This is the detailed work. This has been a couple months in the making, so I'm sure you're happy to close this one out. We'll see you in 6 months. So the next is a review of our action items, but if we could first go to our evening agenda, City Clerk. I know we have a number of individuals who have submitted under petitions and communications. We talked about adding that into this meeting as well, just so we could have a full picture of the appointments, right? Because we have the ones that we just approved that will get fully approved tonight, and then these ones. So the first is a communication from now Representative Christian Grant regarding their resignation from the Smart Zone Local Development Authority. So that is referred back to us, and I've also, this is a mayoral appointment, and so Representative Grant was serving in her capacity as a school board member. So I know the mayor has been speaking with GRPS about that. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I don't think it's actually on our list right now because we probably don't have any openings for Smart Zone right now. Next is a communication from Micah Perkins regarding their resignation from the Economic Development Corporation and Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. This will create one opening, I believe, on this board because we were full for a couple of months, so that's good. So those are the two that are getting referred back to us, and I just wanted to pull those out at the top of the meeting. Any questions? All right, so we can go back. So as we go through these, we have the County Building Authority. So great, we just filled that one with
Different one.
a different one?
Correct. There's a county building
geez.
authority and the Grand Rapids Building
Oh,
Authority.
jeez. Well, thank you for noting that. So we still have one on here. And Mr. Berkman left, so he left a little bit too soon.
No, this one, there's a, because of a new county administrator, and so they're working the details of who's gonna sit on that. 'Cause
Got
the
it.
city gets a person, and the county gets one, and then there's one at large.
Okay,
So they're working through that.
great. Thank you so much. See, colleagues, I'm also learning, so lots of, sometimes you're like, these are named absolutely the same thing. I don't have any updates about the Construction Board of Appeals. Again, this is a city manager appointment, and you know what, Lou and I have not been able to connect on this one, but I'm gonna follow up because he has 2 appointments, and I know city manager will not want to have 2 appointments on there. Next is the DID board, and so we just appointed 1 individual, and so there are 2 remaining. I know there were a few that were still in the vetting process, Daniel. I think that continues to be the case. I don't have an opening for the electrical, or I don't have any update about the electrical, but this one will also refer it back to our chief of staff. And then the Grand Rapids Building Authority, we just approved this one with Ms. Behrens. And the one we just approved, now I'm getting confused again too. The one we approved was it was the building. No, the historical preservation. So I'm going to point that out too, colleagues. We have the Grand Rapids Historical Commission, we have the Historic Preservation Commission, and that can be quite confusing as well. But we still have one opening for the Historical Commission. Our Civilian Appeals Board, we continue to have openings for this. I will say, I know the mayor has talked to some individuals to serve. This is a fairly involved board, and I think I want to be able to go through this so we could talk about some of the differences of the boards. But this is a quasi judicial board, so there is quite a bit of training. Sometimes meetings can go a little bit longer, so we'll continue to look for individuals for those boards. We just filled the Historic Preservation Commission one. The Housing Appeals Board, we now have 2. I have to go back and look at the PIFs, Daniel, that you shared from last week. Thank you for that. I don't know if any were for this Housing Appeals Board, but this would be one, colleagues, that we, look for individuals. This is a mayoral appointment, but if there's individuals that you might have connected with who have interest in this area, we could certainly talk to the mayor about that. For our Income Tax Review Board, we still have one open, but we did do an appointment a couple weeks ago of somebody too. I think we had two, right?
The appointment of Ms. Gelderloos.
Okay, so that one, but we had two at that time, and so this is still one. Is that correct? Okay. All right, we just did one for the Michigan Street Corridor, so we'll still have one remaining there. I'll talk to Commissioner Knight about that as she serves on that body, and it is a mayoral appointment. I don't have any updates for the Monroe Tifa. For our North Corridor Improvement Authority, we actually have one more that should be coming forth in this next packet, right, Daniel? I don't think they made the cut for this last packet.
Correct.
Okay, and so then that will still leave us with one over there. And actually, is this, I have a resignation that's coming, so I don't know if I have two or three. I'll get with you, Daniel, about these. We have some changes going on that board. For the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, we do have one opening here. If you recall from our last meeting, we did have a resignation. So I don't, this is a city commission appointment. I know we try to have a broad base across the city representation. I think in our last review, we probably did need some more representation from like the south side of the first ward. I think there was good representation sort of across the board. But I want to just bring that up to both of you as a city commission appointment. We just did some of our public safety committee appointments, so we'll have just one there, so that's great. And then as it relates to, if you keep on scrolling, city clerk, I don't have any updates for South Division. I think Southtown, there is still someone being vetted. Nothing for stormwater. I know we have a few here for Uptown, but only one for the, or three for the bid and one for the Improvement Authority. So these are both mayoral appointments. And then all of a sudden we have a bunch for urban agriculture. So we need a representative from Kent County. There is a representative of the farmers market. We are working with the farmers market. They have not been able to dedicate somebody to be on this body. And so we've asked if they would be open to us designating somebody else, even if they weren't part of the farmers market. You know, is it a volunteer? Is it somebody else? And so we've been talking to Mr. Marquardt about that, talked to him about that last week. But then the both of you have appointments as well, and Commissioner O'Connor has appointments. So I think we've just had a number of individuals who have resigned from this board. So
Question.
yeah, please.
I know I assume there's a lot of reasons for resignations, you know, people's schedules, conflicts, some of them are associated with people's roles, and roles change. Do we ever do any sort of concerted effort to collect data when folks resign to see if there are other kind of reasons that we should be aware of so that we can mitigate any concerns? I'm thinking if folks don't feel like it's a good use of their time, or they're contributing, or they have, you know, really strong disagreements with the direction of, you know, the body. Just want to make sure that we don't miss feedback like that. And part of the reason why I ask is because I have received feedback like that through informal channels, and I wonder what the potential is to do that through more formal channels so that this body can take action.
Absolutely. That's not something we've done in the past, but we can certainly do some sort of exit survey for folks that leave boards. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Commissioner. I think the liaisons sort of, you know, we're the approval process, and then their interaction is primarily with whoever their liaison is. I think serving on boards is sometimes a really difficult thing because you're volunteering, and I mean, we're having, I think, just some challenges with business owners may be doing some different things on our corridor improvement authorities. Sometimes there's opportunities for individuals to provide services, so then they might need to remove themselves because there's a conflict of interest. I would say a majority of the time, we're getting a letter that is a pretty pro forma letter, so I do like the idea of doing something, a letter is public and they know that, and so something where we could grab that information in a more, in a way where people could feel like they could give us the direct feedback. Because, there might be things I might not want to be in a public letter, right? I might want to call some people in before I call people out, so. I know City Clerk and Daniel, you all have, it's been sort of biannual meetings with our liaisons. So if we can think about what that might be and think about when the next meeting will be for the liaisons. But try to put if you all could get back together and think about a specific and realistic timeline to be able to do that in this next cycle. We just started the year. That's what I would request, and then give us some feedback about timeline and implementation. Thank you. And for Westside, I don't have any updates either. Colleagues, do you have any other things that we want to bring into this conversation about the various openings or anything, as Commissioner Perdue just brought up, in terms of process improvements? I think given the time today, I am going to ask if we could move the conversation about some of the different types of boards that we have. So I think there was an email chain after the last meeting to talk about the various boards, some that are, I think there's not very many, maybe one or two that are quasi-judicial. Some have specific charges in their bylaws, so every board should have different bylaws as well. And then some serve in a more advisory capacity. And then, of course, I think we have these boards that are, I don't want to say they're separate than that, but where we're utilizing an economic development tool, like the Brownfield and Economic Development or corridor improvement authorities. And so we could talk about some of the history of those as well, because some of them started off in one way, like our Little North Corridor Authority. We didn't have a lot of money to begin with. We've been able to have more tax capture, so now we're able to do more things. So, Patrick, would that be something? Could you do a little overview of some of the governance pieces, like what the quasi-judicial ones do, and the advisory, and then the different boards? And then we've had some updates on the economic development side, so maybe we don't need to quite do that quite as much.
Sure, Daniel and I can work together.
So that's referred to staff. But I think, colleagues, were there any other topics that we want to include? So maybe the next meeting, we should have a number of appointments as well, because I know we've been talking about some of those. I'm going to highlight again probably the housing appeals and public safety and CAB, where we really want to focus getting those appointments in. And then in the next meeting, we'll hold off on doing the full review of this and talk about the different types of boards, but still fit it under our last action item. Sound good? Absolutely. All right. Hearing no other questions, we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 8:23. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, good morning, everyone. We will call our fiscal committee meeting to order here at 8:30. First item on the agenda this morning is a resolution to authorize an agreement with the Salvation Army for an amount not to exceed $156,689 for the eviction prevention program.
So moved.
Moved and supported. Ms. Bohach, good morning.
Good morning. So this is the third allocation the city has received of Emergency Solutions Grants coronavirus funds. We received these through a national reallocation process, and Grand Rapids was one of the communities that had actually spent their first two allocations, and so we had the opportunity to have this third round. We solicited applications for this particular proposal along with our annual funding process, our neighbor investment plan process. It's underway right now. And so this application was vetted through that process, has also gone in front of the Coalition on Homelessness. They have a review committee as well. This just happens to have a faster timeline to be able to get it under contract than our typical funds, which has a longer process, a 30-day comment period. We have to have these obligated by March 20th, and so that's why we're bringing this one project forward. But it's been considered in along with many other projects along the way that we'll be bringing to you on March 14th in terms of what those recommendations will be.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? Any idea of how many people this $157,000?
Yeah, so approximately 35 households. So this is for the intake as well as the financial assistance. So it's, not just the financial assistance. And we're seeing anywhere from $2,500 to $2,600 per household that's needed right now.
Very good. All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Bohach. Item 2, resolution authorizing a budget substitution for stormwater catch basin and manhole lining in the amount of $199,847.83.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Rivette, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Rivette with the Environmental Services Department. I take the lead on our stormwater program. This is a program we actually started doing beyond the pilot and regular budgeting last year for fiscal year 23 this year. It's expected to, it's third to a quarter of the cost of actually structurally reconstructing a manhole line. A manhole lining it will give us a lot more durability for a lower cost. And basically, when we were looking at the 24 budget, we found the transfer pad station, which is where we would dump out our Vector and multi-cleaning devices for storm sewers and sanitary sewers. We have a place to dispose of that. At one point in time, we were going to move that. That project has fallen through, so we are going to use that money or would like to use that money to fund the FY24 as opposed to requesting more from the capital budget.
All right. Colleagues? All right, hearing no questions. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, resolution to waive the penalty on real property taxes for the Avenue Apartments Limited Dividend Housing and Uptown Village Limited Dividend Housing for 3 parcels in the amount of $3,644.66.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Mr. Treasurer, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is an item that I'm bringing forward that is really a rare occurrence for us. We've asked for these waivers 3 times, really going back to 2009, 10, and 11. The process that we have in place is that in our city code, we have 1.377, which allows the city treasurer to waive up to $200, but amounts above that, I have to come to the fiscal committee to request approval for this. This is an unfortunate set of circumstances with these parcels. They actually had their pilot lapse, their pilot certification lapsed. And so it took them from their typical pilot billing and moved it onto the ad valorem property tax. What that essentially did is it took them from about a $10,000 annual bill to $64,000. And so with this, we're already going to, all the local taxing authorities are getting roughly 5 times more money than they would have received. But to make matters worse, it's almost like, trying to get through the process of working with the Michigan Tax Tribunal and trying to come to a resolution. Their original bill would have been over $100,000. And so they had their properties reappraised, and we assessed that accordingly and worked through it with the assessor's office. And we're able to bring that down to about $64,000. We're trying to add a little bit of grace to that. They do have their pilots in place for 2023. And so part of that is that I'm asking to waive that penalty piece. It was part of the conversations with the property owner. They had asked for a payment plan, they had asked to waive fees. Because of the way the property tax works, we have to transfer these taxes to the county at March 1st. And so we have very little flexibility to add any type of payment plan, but what we can do is come forward to ask for a waiver of those penalties. And that's what I'm doing today.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions for Mr. Glinski?
Thank you for the overview.
Yeah. All right.
Quick
Well, thanks for.
question, pilot certificate, can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yep, it's actually, the name's a little bit of a misnomer. It says payment in lieu of tax, but it's actually service charge in lieu of tax. And so when you have these low-income property developments, what they will do is come forward and they'll work, you'll see Ms. Bohach come forward with these to start with, where projects come forward to ask for that type of designation. What that does is allows them to work with MSHDA and then look for low-income or actually financing for their projects. They may or may not come forward. So the process really starts with us 2, 3, 4 years in advance of them actually breaking ground. And so this helps provide a lower property tax for those rental units that are not market rate. And so this helps those developers fill that gap with the different type of housing that we need, and actually provides them better financing opportunities. And as well as that, with our pilot, it allows us to then ask them if they wish to also contribute to the Affordable Housing Fund as part of the process.
Yeah, in 2016, so pilot's typically a 4% service fee of the shelter rents. And then in 2016, after the affordable housing workshop got done, one of the recommendations was to change it. So it's now a developer has the ability to select a 3% service fee, but two points of that go into the affordable housing fund that we have set up and are finally kicking off. So there's also, it creates a funding stream. So it lowers the liability of an affordable housing developer by 1%, but then it allows, we take 2 points of that and it flows into the affordable housing fund in perpetuity. So it's a revenue stream to continue to, so affordable housing, then funding additional affordable housing. Any additional questions? All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you,
you.
sir. Item 4, ordinance amending Section 1 of the Budget Ordinance 2022-13 for fiscal year 2023, amendment number 11.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and supported. Ms. Claren, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have 4 items this morning. The first one is just to close out a 2020 FEMA grant we received related to COVID PPE in the amount of $11,100.80, revenue and appropriations to the Fire Grants Fund with no effect on fund balance. Number 2 is from the Engineering Department. This is the replacement of Kingsbury Sanitary Lift Station. This is just under $2 million of revenue and appropriations of the Sewer Replacement Fund, and no effect on retained earnings, and also appropriation over on the operations side, Fund 5900, with a corresponding decrease in retained earnings. The third item is a bit unusual. It's a contribution to our Budget Stabilization Fund. When I gave the financial update in the beginning of December, we did really well in fiscal year 22 for income tax, and because our net income was a result of operating a surplus of operating revenue, outside of, we're able to contribute to it outside of, grants or any other kind of assistance. This was purely from our income tax doing well. We're able to contribute to the Budget Stabilization Fund. Our goal is to hit 10% of expenditures for the general fund. So we decided to go ahead and make the contribution of $3.5 million. This will get us back into compliance with that 10% goal. And also, we haven't made a contribution since 2018, so we thought it was a good forward-looking thing to do. The Budget Stabilization Fund, just to put it in layman's terms, is basically a rainy day fund for the city. So we did not have to dip into this during the COVID pandemic, but it is a nice tool to have in case you do have poor economic times. So seeing how, I'll give a very brief update later during like how, but seeing how we are heading into a mild recession, might have some more sticky moments in the upcoming years, I thought, conferring with city manager, we thought this was a good step to take. So we will be making that contribution. And then finally, from the executive office, we have the participatory budgeting pilot evaluation services. This is simply $16,000 revenue appropriations into the other grants fund to supplement the grant, I believe, that's already been contributed there. So that contingent balance remains at 2.5 million. If there's any questions.
Colleagues, questions for the financial officer?
Go ahead.
Commissioner, just one question.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps our CFO could comment on this, but pertaining to the budget stabilization item, a great action, and I think you mentioned that we hadn't made a contribution since 2018, and I think we have had a couple of years where we've dipped below that 10% goal. So my question is, do you think we have an opportunity to clarify, our approach to truing up that balance to maintain it over 10% on an annual basis, or
I think we didn't have the opportunity to for, through the pandemic, because our net income was always as a result of the application of first the CARES funds and then the ARPA dollars. So 2022 has been our first opportunity. We do discuss it every year. It's not necessarily, it's an annual thing I do report on in my financial updates. I confer with city manager about, would this be something we want to do this year or not? But it's not an automatic. Every year, where are we at? We have the conversation. We don't necessarily take action depending on other things that are stressing the general fund at the time. So I think this year was a great opportunity because we performed so well with income tax revenue, and we did put an extra cushion in there, so we won't necessarily have to do that this time next year. We might still be at that 10% goal, but yeah. So it's just discussed annually, but not necessarily. And I, in my November update, as well as when I present the budget, I do make the city and commission apprised of where we're at. So, yep.
Thank you.
I was going to say also that rating agencies do have appreciated our performance with our budget stabilization fund, and they're always, so me, when I'm going through a ratings call, I want that to be 10% at least. So yeah, I'm happy to be back into compliance, seeing how we have big capital projects on our horizon. So, yeah.
Commissioner Sassi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment was just going to be, as we're doing continuing onboarding, you had talked a little bit about the fund, but this really came out of the last downturn in our economy in 2008, 2009 that the city enacted.
It was
the policy.
established,
So
yep.
Wanted to share that for Commissioner Perdue. And I think to City Comptroller's question, I think those are good questions, and I think that's something that the City Commission should take up as a whole when we do our mid-year review. And as Ms. Claren said, those are typical conversations that have been had in past mid-year reviews and budget conversations. Thank you.
Commissioner Perdue?
So item 2 refers to supporting developments in Walker. Can you make that connection for me?
This is related to the
Lift station?
the lift station. I don't know if anyone here is that can talk to it.
So
This is aligning.
the city water system is outside of Grand Rapids, so sometimes we have projects in other communities because we have the water system that services those communities. So they're ratepayers into the system, so their fees cover the cost of us managing. We run it as an enterprise type department.
So is this just showing that this is just to support some of our work outside of the city?
Sure. So we're part of we run a regional system. It's 11 customer communities out in here comes James. It's 11 partner communities, and I don't see her in the audience today, but Janessa Carter, our utility financial officer, comes up annually to explain how we allocate out the costs per customer community and then get recovery through what we issue them as here's your rate. So I don't know if James, you want to add anything to that?
Great question, Commissioner. As Commissioner O'Connor mentioned, our system goes outside the city. The sanitary lift station is in Walker. It's a really important lift station. It's been on the books to be replaced for some time. And we work with our partner communities when they have these types of projects that they want to put forward. And as part of the rate study, that's included in that. And this is simply just a replacement, but it's a very important lift station.
Thank you.
And you saw that, I think we got that rate study recently, and it shows each community has a varying rate based on the level of usage in that community. So this will be reflected in the rate that the partner community pays to
That's
help
correct.
offset the improvements that they need and request to happen within the.
That's helpful.
But you're going to see these from time to time, water main extensions, things that are going to happen in our partner communities that come before this board.
Cool. Thank you, James. I too just want to share my thanks to the financial department and the city manager for prioritizing the budget stabilization fund. It's something we talk about. I talk about every year at least, is saying we need to get to our commission goal of 10%. Our general fund threshold is also a 15% reserve in our general operating funds. Quick question for you about the budget stabilization fund. It's a state-enabled fund. We have an internal policy of 10%, but you can have up to 20% in a budget stabilization fund?
Gosh, I believe so.
Okay.
And it also requires a 2/3 vote of the commission to utilize those funds.
Right, to be able to expend
Yep.
those. Yeah, I think just as again, having some new colleagues around the table, if you could bring just an item next time we talk about stuff, about what commission policy is around general fund reserves, budget stabilization fund reserves, and the capital improvement fund, just so I think that'd be a helpful educational
Absolutely.
exercise.
Great, thank you, Chair.
All right. All right, well, with no further questions, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 5 is our bid list resolution for February 21, 2023.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and supported. Colleagues, any questions about any of the items on the bid list this morning?
I don't have any.
All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6, our warrant report for January 25, 2023 through February 7, 23. Travel and funds reports for December 22. Mr. Comptroller.
Good morning, Commissioners. So for the warrant report here this morning, during the period of January 25th through February 7th, the city released total payments of approximately $21.1 million. That includes just under $5.6 million for our employee payroll expenses and just over $129,000 for income tax warrants. In terms of quantity, we issued 173 income tax refunds and 1,169 checks and electronic payments. And as always, the details on the tables and the following pages contain all the information on those payments greater than $20,000. Also this morning, we have for you here our December fiscal year-to-date travel summary report. This details travel spend by each city department for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And so that report is showing that during that period so far, we've spent $745,000 year-to-date, or about 31% of the total allotted budget for the year. And then lastly here, we have our monthly funds report also for the December fiscal year-to-date period, first 6 months of the fiscal year. And this is a report that we make available to residents that just provides some very high-level kind of basic commentary on some of the revenue and expense drivers in the governmental funds, enterprise funds, or I believe the 9 funds on here that account for much of the city's revenues and expenses. And so it just provides an additional color for those that are interested on learning a little bit more about some of those operational drivers in city funds. And this is available always on our city website as well. And that concludes the reports that I have for you this morning.
Very good. Any questions for the comptroller? All right, hearing none. Those in favor? Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not a motion. This is a received and filed. So that report will be received and filed. Let's get rolling here. If it's on the teleprompter, he will read it. Right? you Anchorman fans out there. Treasurer's report for the period of January 21, 2023 through February 7, 2023. Mr. Treasurer, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. With a report today, there's been a few things that have changed. Actually, this chart is now obsolete as of last week when the producer price index increased. What that did is it threw the markets into a point where they're now planning 3 interest rate hikes now. It's a 100% likelihood that they're going to have 25 basis point hike in March. There's grumblings that there might even be a 50 basis point hike. That could be the extreme. That might tip the markets a little bit more than I would expect. But we're looking at 25 point hike in March, May, and June. It is that inflation's still hot. You know, we look at the jobs that are out there, 517,000 jobs that were created one time. We're looking at the costs for these producers are still up there. It's not coming down yet. So we're still trying to navigate that. And the Fed is not going to take the foot off the gas. They're going to continue to up that rate until they start seeing some measured progress in the economy. So we're actually now looking at a 5.25% to 5.5% top that they're projecting now. But again, things can change quickly. Like right now, today, both Home Depot and Walmart missed on their earnings. And so that's going to impact the market. They're already projecting at least a 300-point drop in the market right away. So we're now having challenges with firms that are laying off people. They're still not hiring in the positions that we need to have filled in the economy. And now we're having headwinds that we're having major corporations missing on their earnings, which then is going to be that harbinger that we keep talking about. We're pretty certain that there's going to be a recession. We don't know how deep it's going to be, but we know that there's one that's imminent. So we ourselves have got a nice stockpile of reserve cash. So we have $538 million in our investment portfolio, of which we're still earning 2.27%. So we're earning a very good clip on that money. And as things mature, we're able to go reinvest that at higher rates. We're able to go out and get things like commercial paper that we got for almost 5% for 270 days. So when we're getting that type of investment, that means we're going to have more money coming into our coffers in terms of interest. But we have some longer term investments that have to mature, that have to then be reinvested for us to continue to see that rise. Our whole goal is to play within a band. We don't want to be the high interest rate earner, but we also don't want to be the low. We want to be the steady Eddie in the center. That then helps us project out our budgets. That then is the work that we do to contribute to the city coffers. So with that, I have my report for today.
Very good. Colleagues, questions for the treasurer? All right. Hearing none, that report will be received and filed.
Thank you.
And with that, we will conclude fiscal at 8:53. Thank you, everyone.
Benny to begin. Just wanted to say again to everybody, good morning. I'm in a good mood. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm in a good mood in spite of the ice that's coming our way. We have 6 resolutions this morning and 9 resolutions this morning. Beginning at number 1 is a resolution approving an amendment to an agreement approved on October the 4th, 2022, with the Michigan Department of Transportation for the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant for the Traffic Management Operations Center with a total cost of $660,000. Mr. Berkman, who has that?
So moved.
Oh.
Good morning, Commissioners. So just as a reminder, so back in October, this was approved by City Commission, and just for some of the new commissioners, the city is actually we operate all of the traffic signals for the entire region, for all of Kent County and portions of Ottawa County. And so this agreement helps us with funding and support of that Regional Traffic Management Operations Center. One tiny thing happened. The Federal Highway Administration decided to change the rules after we approved it back in October, and they are mandating us to have you all amend this agreement for the inclusion of Form 1273, which basically dictates subcontracting rules, which does not apply at all to the city. But this is a request that they made formally of the city to, with our Department of Law, to actually go back and amend the original resolution just to say that we're including this agreement. It has no impact at all to any of the funding. It is just a minor change that's being requested from both the Federal Highway Administration and the Michigan Department of Transportation.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions?
If it doesn't impact us, why do we have to? I mean, is it like mandated that we have to adopt it?
It is a mandate as part of the agreement, and we went back and forth, and we were trying to make it as an administrative change, but they actually specifically require proof that it has been approved by the governing body, and it has been amended into the form.
Can we get a copy of what that looks like?
We can.
The language of it, you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, the Department of...
It has language in there about subcontractors, right?
It has requirements for how you do subcontracting, none of which in our review with the Department of Law applies to the city at all.
Okay.
It's just a requirement that both the state as well as the federal government are for all the subsidiaries of this type of funding.
Commissioner Drew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 2, a resolution scheduling a public hearing on March 28th, 2023 for a programmatic agreement with the Michigan State Historic Preservation Officer. Good morning, Ms. Bohatch.
Good morning. So this is...
Hold it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Support.
Thank you.
I got a little excited. See, I'm in a good mood today, too.
All right. All right.
All right, so this item is something that comes before you every year. We have a public hearing. It's a requirement for these programmatic agreements. This is for the Section 106 National Historic Preservation Act, and the city is responsible for facilitating the requirements under that act. Thanks to our partners at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's really their responsibility, and they delegate that. So another mandate, Commissioner Knight, from the federal government, though, to the local jurisdictions. So we're responsible for that. It does give us the opportunity, though, to have these agreements with the State Historic Preservation Officer. And these are really important agreements because if we didn't have them in place, then we would have to take every project that might meet this certain threshold to go for this historic, for this review, would have to go to the state office and wait for their review process that is very lengthy. So this allows us a lot of local control to do some of that work here and only send some of our more complicated and things that meet a higher threshold to the state for their review. And it comes in two different agreements. One is for activities that are addressing lead hazards, and one that is not. So it's two different agreements for those different activities. And this is setting a date for a public hearing, and that public hearing will be March 28th, and there's a 30-day comment period that will be from March 14th through April 14th, and we also obtain or would take written comments as well during that time.
Thank you, Ms. Bohatch. Colleagues, any questions?
You said it's annual. I guess, is there any major changes that we should be aware of?
So the agreement isn't annual, but the requirement to hold a public hearing is annual.
Got it. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Number 3 is a resolution scheduling a public hearing on March 28, 2023 for the draft fiscal year of 2024 Consolidated Housing and Community Development Annual Action Plan and funding recommendations for our home investment partnership, which is the American Rescue Act project.
So moved.
Support.
Ms. Bohaj.
And sorry, that's such a mouthful for a title, isn't it? So this is our annual allocation process, and within that framework, we also have to do a 30-day comment period. So this is setting the date of March 28th for that public hearing as well. And this covers the neighborhood investment plan, so our annual allocations for the Home Investment Partnerships Program, the Community Development Block Grant, and the Emergency Solutions Grant Funds. In addition to that, we also solicited proposals for the remaining funds for the Home ARP funds as well. So we like to do that all at one time, bring you recommendations forward on those proposed projects to be funded through this public hearing process. So we would bring to you the actual presentation for entities to be recommended for funding on March 14th. And that's actually wrapped up into what's called the Annual Action Plan, and that serves as our application to the federal government for those annual funds that we receive. So again, this is setting the public hearing for March 28th. There'd be a 30-day comment period starting March 14th and going through April 14th. So citizens would also have the opportunity to provide comments in writing during that time period as well.
So Ms. Bohaj's action plan does help individuals find housing, correct?
Well, there are projects that would be recommended that would provide financial assistance. It supports affordable housing creation and preservation. So would be a variety of projects that would be funded once the City Commission actually approves those funding.
Yes. Colleagues, any questions?
So would any of those funds then, I'm going to tie this to the lead ordinance that we're in discussions about, would any of those funds be able to assist or offset some of the costs from homeowners that are trying to do remediation on their properties that may not be able to afford those full costs?
So the actual projects that are being reviewed now, that we don't have all the funding recommendations will be presented on the 14th. However, we don't have, I'm trying to think, we would not have projects specifically addressing lead in the neighborhood investment plan. However, the city's housing rehabilitation programs do address lead hazards, and we have a lead hazard control program in place.
Commissioner Drew? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 4 is a resolution, well, not lose my spot here. Yeah, number 4, resolution, a public hearing considering an amendment to the Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate 2021-029 pursuant to Public Act 198 of 1974 for Black Mirror at 1809 Century Avenue Southwest.
So moved.
Support.
I think this is
Good
Mr.
morning.
Garcia
Yes.
this morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. So this is, again, scheduling this public hearing to consider an amendment to a existing industrial facility exemption that was approved in April of 2021. And just for more context, Blackmore's current project involves the demolition of, it has demolished a 48,000 square foot foundry and plans to construct a 55,000 square foot manufacturing space in its place. And it currently employs just over 230 employees and anticipates hiring 54 new employees. Again, this was originally approved in April 2021, but because of complications related to the pandemic, such as supply chain issues and significant cost increase, the project has now exceeds $11.6 million and Per the IFT legislation, anything that exceeds 10% of the original amount requires a new public hearing, and so therefore we're bringing that through that process. But construction has commenced on the project already.
Thank you. Blackmere has been in this community for such a long time. I remember when they were up in Petoskey, Michigan, and they migrated down to Grand Rapids, so I'm familiar with this company. Colleagues, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 5, a resolution approving the transfer of obsolete properties rehabilitation exemption certificate number 3-14-0010 from Lofts on 820 LLC to the new co-owners, 820 Lofts LLC and 820 Lofts GR LLC.
So moved.
Okay.
Yep, so this is, again, a transfer of a current Oprah exemption certificate to the new ownership who acquired the property in December 19, 2022, essentially submitting an application for that transfer of the remaining benefit of the exemption, which expires on 20/30/2024. And again, for context, this is the 820 Monroe project, essentially where City Built Brewing is today, in Field and Fire, and also some residential units, I guess a little over 87 units. So staff recommends approval of the Oprah certificate to the new co-owners for the property. And this is a pretty standard process that we utilize when properties are purchased.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, colleagues? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 6 is a resolution setting the date to consider a major amendment to the Celebration Village Special District Plan Redevelopment District to facilitate development of 2160 Celebration Drive Northeast.
So moved.
Chair Moody, I'm stepping in for Ms. Turkelson this morning. She's unable to be here, so I'll just give a brief overview and then happy to answer any questions. This is an approval from the Planning Commission to allow a major amendment to Celebration Village Planned Redevelopment District. So that's an area that has been developed over time at the corner of Knapp Street and East Beltline Avenue. Oh, here comes Ms. Turkelson, just in time. If it gets tough, we can call her up to the podium. There had been a vision for this particular part of the PRD to allow mixed-use development and parking and potentially a hotel. The developers have now come forward with a new proposal for this particular area, which is currently a surface parking lot, and that is housing. So it will be mixed use with up to 250 housing units, some retail on the ground floor, and associated parking. And the Planning Commission has approved this, and this resolution would set March 14th for the Commission to take action on the proposed amendment.
Thank you. I do know that there was at one point, there was a lot of concern about parking in that particular area, but I'm glad they got that resolved.
Yes, so there is a requirement before permits could be issued that there be a shared parking agreement. So that will have to be provided by the developer. If they're unable to get to that point, then they'll have to rethink the parking issue.
Colleagues, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 7, a resolution approving a construction agreement and accepting the public utility easement for Sedona Hills.
So moved.
Support.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Bergman, thank you.
So Sedona Hills is a single-family home development that's located in Grand Rapids Charter Township, located south of Bradford Street and west of Bradford Greens Court. The construction agreement before you is our standard agreement that covers the terms and conditions by which public water main will be extended to serve the development, and then the utilities easement gives us the rights to maintain the asset once installed. So request your approval of this resolution approving both of those items.
Sounds good to me, sir. Colleagues, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 8 is a resolution awarding a contract with Wyoming Excavators, Inc. for the reconstruction of Burton Alley and Marshall Alley in the amount of $362,846 with a total amount not to exceed $564,000.
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Bergman.
So this is a pilot project that'll provide green infrastructure to these two alleys that currently do not have stormwater infrastructure at all. And so the installation will include permeable pavers and infiltration basins with the goal of helping to go towards reduction of flooding and erosion in downstream Plaster Creek and overall improving water quality. In particular, these two alleys are located south of Burton and east of Eastern, to kind of give you a reference point. This project will also complement other grant-driven projects that the West Michigan Environmental Action Council is pursuing that will install green infrastructure on private business properties, including a project in the immediate vicinity on the Grand Rapids area Black businesses owned parking area right where these two alleys intersect. So we received 4 bids on January 10th, and Wyoming Excavators supplied that low bid of $362,846. That was over the engineer's estimate of $296,000. The project team carefully reviewed the bids and attribute the overage to the difficult to predict bidding climate that we are in, as well as some overall some smaller quantity items that had higher than anticipated unit pricing. For instance, the permeable block pavers alone added $37,000 over what the estimate was. The 3 other bids came in between $402,000 and $419,000. So we feel that the bid is appropriate and recommend that Wyoming receive the award. They will utilize a 14.6% MLBE participation rate. M&H Construction will be the sub for concrete work. And also worth noting that Wyoming themselves are a registered MLBE as well. So asking for your approval of the contract award to Wyoming with the total not to exceed amount of $564,000, that amount coming from the Capital Improvement Fund stormwater line item.
You know, I am excited the fact that they're using those MLBEs in both this particular project and there's some other projects that we'll be talking about later. Sure. So I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, actually, I'm excited about it. I think it's great. Colleagues, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 9, a resolution awarding a contract with Wyoming Excavators, Inc. for systematic sidewalk repairs in various locations. 2023-1 in the amount of $1,504,277 with a total amount not to exceed $1,595,000.
So moved.
Mr. Bergman, this is yours again.
All right. So under the Vital Streets program, we're systematically going through the entire city, inspecting all of our existing sidewalk infrastructure. There's about 960 miles of sidewalks throughout the city. And we're about 44% of our way through the entire city. And so what we do is we walk each of the segments, visually inspect them, identify areas that need to be repaired, and then this contract will handle that. So specifically, it replaces non-compliant sidewalk, this one for the area of the city's 3rd ward, and in particular, it's focused in on the Madison area and southeast end neighborhoods, so the area bounded by Adams, Burton, Jefferson, and the east city limits. 4 bids were received on January 31st, and Wyoming, again, in this case, provided the low bid in that amount of $1,504,277, which was under the engineer's estimate of about $1.53 million. They will be utilizing a 42% MLBE participation rate. This case, Duran Contractors performing the concrete work. So request your approval of the award to Wyoming with that not to exceed amount of $1,595,000 coming from the Sidewalk Repair Fund.
I can't imagine to tell you how thankful I am with this. I can't tell you how many telephone calls I got about the streets, sidewalks on Madison and Burton area. I mean, personal calls. I mean, if you got a call with somebody that's fussing you out about a sidewalk, you'd say, okay, guys, how do we get this stuff resolved? But this tells it right here today, and I just want to say this is a good project. Once again, I think the MLBs in this particular area is also helping make some changes in that particular community with bidding as well. So, colleagues, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that, it is approximately 9:34. The Community Development Committee is now closed.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole on this lovely winter day. So commissioners, a couple things about our day together today. First off, it's good to see everyone. We have here at Committee of the Whole, we have 3 action items, and then we have a pretty detailed and in-depth briefing that will likely take well over an hour, hour and a half. And I'll walk you through structure of that when we get to it. And then we have an executive session. We'll be meeting for executive session in room 611. And this is an executive session related to potential property. And so we'll have a conversation about that in executive session. And then public safety is 2:30 back here in the chambers. And then we're back here tonight at 7, but also a reminder that we do have the kickoff to the update of the master plan tonight. That kicks off at 5 o'clock. I believe tonight's is at GRPS University. And then we have 2 more, one tomorrow night and the next night from 5 to 7. So we'll be spreading those around, 1 in each ward. So with that, commissioners, I'll get started today with the first item. This is a resolution to approve the request for a temporary authorization from Hopcat GR LLC, located at 25 Ionia, for the Irish on Ionia 10th anniversary, which will take place on March 18th, right around St. Patty's Day. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. City Clerk, anything to add to this?
The only thing is that it's gone through all the approval process, and this now, I guess when you get 10 years, it's a historic event now. So hope everyone comes out and enjoys that. That's right.
All right. Any questions, commissioners? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving a brownfield plan amendment for 415 Sheldon Avenue Southeast redevelopment project. This is located at 415 Sheldon Avenue. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All right, moved and supported. So commissioners, we had a public hearing related to this item. I'll see if Mr. Gracia wants to add any additional detail.
No significant detail to add. Obviously, it's a development of a vacant lot and will result in, trying to remember the number of units. Help me, I'm trying to got too many projects in my head right now. 57 new units, I'm sorry. And this will be obviously the brownfield plan and also an accompanying item for NEC.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments? It's good to see this move forward. I know all of us received a copy of the updated housing needs assessment. I know the city manager will work on making sure we get a briefing on that. But clearly we need more housing units at all price points all over our city in every neighborhood. So this is good to see it move forward. Any additional questions or comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, and this takes us to a companion item, and this is a resolution establishing the 415 Sheldon Avenue Southeast Neighborhood Enterprise Zone at the same location, 415 Sheldon Avenue. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Mr. Gracia, anything to add on this? All right. Commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, I think before I move to our city manager for the mid-year update, I'll call the question to go into executive session. This is in room 601. Oh, sorry, 601. Thank you for correcting me. This will be in room 601. So commissioners, can I get a motion to go in executive session? This will be immediately after the briefing.
So moved.
Support. All right, moved and supported, and this is a voice vote, so I'll start down here with Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Yes.
Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi? Yes. And Commissioner Purdue? Yes. And I'm a yes. All right, so commissioners, after the mid-year update, you can grab a bite to eat if you need or something to drink, and then we'll meet down in room 601. All right, with that, I will turn it over to our city manager. So many of you know that we have periodic updates and briefings and workshops, quite frankly, throughout the year as we prepare for our budget. So one of them that we do every year at the start of the year is a mid-year performance update, and it has a number of aspects to it, and I'll let the city manager talk about that. And then towards the end, we'll talk about the agenda and schedule between now and June. City manager, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning to you and commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to provide this mid-year update on both performance as well as financial report. And I will ask, who's controlling the slides?
Oh, I can do it from here.
Next slide, please. And so today, what we'd like to do is take some time this morning to go over our performance objectives, our performance plan, and give an update by our various priorities. Today, we also want to have a conversation about, in addition to the financial update, but some of the legislative priorities. There's been a lot of change both in Lansing as well as in DC, and we wanted to provide an update on what some of the policy opportunities are, as well as opportunities to get additional legislative financial support. And then do something a little bit different today, since we have some opportunity for some of these one-time dollars that are not recurring revenue streams, to talk about some of the potential transformational capital projects that we could take advantage of within our community. Next slide. And so just as a reminder of the process, we began discussing commission priorities back in November of 2022 during a work session. Hopefully, some of our newly elected officials were just intaking the results of the election, but hopefully you had a chance to watch the prioritization workshop back then. We also had an opportunity to perform a fiscal update end of year on December. And today, we will use this opportunity to kind of one last touch and go before I start preparing the staff recommended, city manager recommended fiscal plan for 2024. And as the schedule shows, we have several opportunities for the budget presentation and deliberation from April 25th through the adoption on May 23rd. So almost a month of conversation before the fiscal year begins July 1st. Then we'll come back and talk again in September about our annual performance report. Next slide. So just to reorient us to kind of not what we do, but kind of the why. We do it in terms of these updates. If you begin with our 6 values for the city of Grand Rapids, we believe that this furthers accountability and making sure that we can be transparent about the operations of the city as well as the finances of the city. It also shows how collaborative we are, both with the public and each department, as there's no one city department that can help us achieve all of the objectives in terms of improving performance, and we have to do that together. And speaking of collaboration, I do want to recognize our performance management office and the leadership of Ms. Allison Sutter for her steady steering of our organization through these discussions and making sure that she seeks the collaboration of all of the other departments, and appreciate her work, and we'll hear from her a little later. But also, and you'll hear today us talk about the importance of increasing our ability to serve the public, doing it in a very equitable manner and making sure that we are inclusive as possible and disaggregating data to the extent possible where we can by both geography as well as ethnicity. And also doing things that we haven't done before to further our value of innovation. And of course, making sure that we are responsible of how we take care of our environment, but also how people interact with the environment to ensure that everyone prospers in a very sustainable way. So we'll go through each of the organizational priorities: governmental excellence, economic prosperity, engage in connected community, health and environment, mobility, and safe community, and talk about some of our performance updates. Next slide. And so, for example, when this is a slide that we used in the November Commission workshop retreat. And we listed each of our 6 priorities, and you see those are listed all the way to the left. And within those priorities areas, we highlighted the places we wanted to focus more and go a little bit deeper between the focus areas and the topics. So within governmental excellence, this commission said it was important to make sure that we maintain fiscal sustainability, that we focus on talent, attention, and retraction, because there is no municipal services if we don't have municipal workers. And also that we look at some of the other things that help us with good government, like our financial systems, making sure that our facilities are being kept up to speed and that we have the right amount of facilities, and that we look at ways that we can improve the administration of services in different areas of our community. And we will talk a little bit about the Third Ward Equity Fund, as well as other corridor improvement areas, and you'll hear later on an update about our legislative priorities. On economic prosperity and affordability, this commission and staff, we discussed the need to really focus more on increasing housing supply and focusing on the unhoused community, and you've heard several briefings this year and towards the end of the last year on those topics. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with one of our transformational projects around 201 Market, and today happens to be the kickoff for the celebration of the journey and creation of our community master plan. You'll also hear a brief update about the Affordable Housing Fund. There's been recent discussion around the cannabis industry and how we are utilizing some of the funds for both maintaining operations as well as the social justice fund. And you'll hear in our legislative update some of the updates on some of the grants from the revitalization and placemaking process, as well as river redevelopment. Within respect to engage and connected community, we've really been focused on the PB process, participatory budgeting process, really finding ways to re-engage with our neighborhood associations. We've had some discussions this year around that, and I'm hoping what you can see is how intentional we have been around bringing back topics and issues to this dais that reflects the priorities of this commission. Also, we'll talk a little bit about the way that we've done community night out in the past and what we have planned for this year, and even the interaction this afternoon at Public Safety Committee will address a little bit about the incorporation of the National Civic Lead in some of our future community engagement efforts. Next slide. With respect to mobility, we know that reducing vehicle emissions is one way to address some of our climate change goals. We'll also talk about the need for adequate parking and the competitiveness within our community around parking rates. I believe some of you have received inquiries about, the cost of parking in downtown, and I know there have been recent stories around that. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with our downtown shuttle, as well as address some of the concerns that we've heard around parking enforcement. With respect to health and environment, Ms. Sutter will give us an update on our climate action plan. We'll also hear what is being done in terms of maintaining and growing our parks and parks amenities, as well as you've heard some recent discussions. I'll just skip over to the key topics around what we've been doing with reducing childhood lead-based paint exposure in our rental certification program. Actually, we have a hearing on that very topic tonight. And I know that there's been lots of questions that have come to the forefront around the recent settlement regarding opioids, and we'll talk a little bit about that here today. And then lastly, regarding safe community, lots of work has been done in that area, and we will talk about both what we've done in terms of crime prevention as well as response and public safety reform. I see we have a lot of our representatives here today from law enforcement, and the reason that they're here today because in addition to talking about some of the things that we've done in the plan, Chief Winstrom will unveil the updated strategic plan for the Grand Rapids Police Department, which was one of the key focus areas that we highlighted last year. We'll also talk about the fire department's efforts to make sure they have adequate facilities and the expansion of fire stations in a couple areas of our city, as well as our co-response efforts. Next slide, please. So what I would ask that we do, we're going to give you 3 opportunities to pause and engage. And what I'll try to do is I'll ask the staff to go through all the priorities up to mobility. Then we'll pause after mobility, see what questions this body has. Then we'll proceed into the safety section for an update. And in the police department strategic plan. Then we'll pause after the safety section, and then we'll go into the financial and legislative section. Then we'll pause and see what other questions remain after that. So with that, I will begin by turning it over to Ms. Sutter.
Thank you, City Manager. Good morning, Mayor, Commission, and other city staff that are here this morning. Actually, for this component, I am standing in for Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews, who's unable to be with us this morning. But as City Manager said, we're going to go through each of those priorities in order in which they are in our strategic plan. Of course, that was updated by the City Manager and approved at the very end of October. So for those who have been on the commission, you may see a little realignment. So just recall that we went over that update at the end of October. And we'll take a few minutes just to go slowly and reiterate some of the activities and performance to date, knowing that we have, of course, some new commission that are around the dais today and wanting to make sure that you have a full awareness and understanding of some of the great work that's being done by all of the departments and city staff across the city. So as per usual, governmental excellence is the first priority within our strategic plan. And the way that we have organized the presentation is the first slide where you see the orange table. We are going to reiterate the commitments that were made for fiscal year 23 that would be done. Of course, we're only midway through the year, so some items may not have updates at this point in time, as these were commitments for the full fiscal year 23, but want to provide to you an update where things stand after the first 6 months of the fiscal year for July through December of 2022. After we review high level the commitments that were made, we will then highlight some of the select performance that has been done to date. It is, of course, not meant to be inclusive of every activity that has been accomplished. That would take quite some time, but really just to kind of give you an overview of a number of those activities that are aligned to the focus areas and the key topics that City Manager reviewed with us just a few minutes ago. We'll also then go over and provide some updates around some of the key metrics that are included in the strategic plan. So that's the cadence we'll take for each of the 6 priorities. So governmental excellence, and we're arranging these by the objectives in the strategic plan. So just some highlights of the commitments that we made in fiscal year 23, working and have hired the new equity analyst in the Office of Equity and Engagement, as well as continuing work around the Third Ward Equity Fund. Wanted to really lift up that the library also committed this year to offer anti-racism training and do a full diversity audit of their entire collection. And then continuing to do work to help uplift MLBEs, micro local business enterprises in our community. One example here showing in our environmental services department and trying to get our mowing contracts to be smaller so that more MLBEs can participate and be contractors for city services. When we look at fiscal sustainability, a couple of big items there with respect to our contract that we have with Guidehouse, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, and then also in our fiscal services department hiring a grants manager position. With respect to the third objective, which is really focused on our own city employees, a big area in terms of HR in getting on our assistant director, looking at completing a compensation study during this year, and then also updating recruiting in our organizational development systems. Some expansion around our wellness programs, of course, continued participation in Grow 1000, and then you'll hear a little bit more about the phenomenal program through Water and Environmental Services around the Water Career Program. The big highlight really under facilities and our workspaces and technology is we are working to complete a city facilities study and master plan of all of our city facilities, and that is being led by our engineering department as well as our facilities department. And of course, another big endeavor in this area is the work being done to select and begin implementing a new enterprise resource planning. For those of you that are new on the dais, often that's referred to as an ERP system that's being replaced and really is the backbone to a lot of our financial systems, our human resources systems, and a number of things that are supported throughout the city. You can see some technology enhancements that are being made, as well as some other facility improvements that are being made as well. With respect to strategic planning and performance management, we've been expanding the system, which is referred to as Invisio, that we use for reporting and allowing other departments to bring on and utilize that system for their own strategic plans. And our golf course is currently working on creating a master plan for the course. Some great work happening as we continue to start and launch more formally innovation and continuous learning, bringing that on with a focus there and some team and some work happening within the city there. And then lastly, these last two, just want to highlight again that these are two new objectives in our strategic plan. And so the last one, just really calling out, of course, it's been work that's been happening for quite some time under the leadership of Ms. Farrick, and she will give some updates there with respect to some of our legislative and policy partnerships that we have. So now that was really our commitments that we made. And so here an overview of some of our select performance to date to give you some examples of what was done in those first 6 months. And so we have started work on the compensation study. And this is something that our HR department has committed to do every 3 years. So that is in process. I believe most of you are aware that the 3-year labor contracts were settled in the beginning with wages and benefits that have been implemented for 6 of 7 of those represented groups. I'm continuing to do work around our values. We mentioned the ERP. That vendor has been selected. Implementation is expected to start toward the very end of fiscal year 23. And we're also looking, as mentioned, to really develop that framework for innovation. And that's something that's going to be launching in March that you'll hear a little bit more about. Some work around embedding equity language better into our RFPs, or requests for proposals and requests for qualifications. That is something that is under legal review currently. Continued work around the cannabis social equity policy. And then also wanted to lift up here, doing some work around our fleet to help roll that over, reduce emissions, and get prepared and continue to build out our electric fleet. We mentioned, of course, the facilities master plan process, and some great work happening in terms of our Treasury Department and our Comptroller's Department to really work to transition systems to be electronic, to be better from a customer service perspective, as well as a sustainability perspective. So to orient you with respect to the metrics that you will see for each of the 6 priorities, we've been working to track the metrics over time. So represented here, you will see fiscal year 21, 22, and then our fiscal year 23 mid-year update that we have on the far right. Target is identifying what has been established. These are all metrics that are included in our strategic plan. And then the date helps to inform everybody as to how often that metric is updated, whether it's annually, biannually, or at a set point in time. So just as an example of one that I will walk through here, the very top one, percentage of capital investments budgeted in our neighborhoods of focus. You can see our historic performance. The color key on the bottom right means green is that we're meeting or exceeding that target. The gold yellow color is near target. That is defined as being less than 10% within the target. Red is not currently meeting the target, and blue is in the case where we are measuring and haven't established a target. So you can see performance over time here with respect to those metrics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Behrens for the next section.
Thank you. So economic prosperity and affordability, as you all know, these outcomes within our strategic plan all rely on each other. So it gets to be a little bit, where do we report which activities, because many of them meet multiple objectives. But we'll do a quick flyover of where we were when the commission adopted the budget for fiscal year 2023. Again, You see on the left there of the table, these are the outcome areas within the economic prosperity and affordability strategic focus area, and some of the key investments. These are above and beyond just the day-to-day operations that we continue on with our staff to deliver throughout the year. So obviously the community master plan is a very significant land use and community conversation. We continue to focus on business job growth and employee readiness and employee skill building. So there are a number of investments there that we'll talk about a little bit, but we'll continue to highlight throughout the year as well. But recently in that area, the commission approved a contract with the Urban League to help us with the development of Black business associated support and working within the community to build an organization that would support Black business, Black-owned businesses. Also housing and housing stability, so we'll talk about that a bit more as we go through these slides, but continues to be a significant need in the community. Just over the last several weeks, Housing Next has presented updated numbers about that. And for the region, housing affordability continues to be a significant area of focus. And the commission invested in that for fiscal year 23, including dedicating $5 million of ARPA funds to the Affordable Housing Fund Board process, which just closed on Friday. We have about 25 to 30 applications going through that process and anticipate bringing that recommendation to the commission at the end of March. And that will dovetail with the typical formula grants process that community development processes, and they are also targeting coming forward in March. So we'll have some exciting progress in that realm soon. Destination City, of course, Grand Rapids continues to invest in those things that benefit not only our residents, but draw tourism. So there's continued effort along the river placemaking projects and work that Ms. Farrick will highlight as well with our partners to attract investments in some of those key projects. So just highlighting a couple of the things that we have accomplished in the first half of the year. Again, you've heard very recently about the community master planning process. So this calendar year 23 is really focused on that community conversation, and that is launching with events including this evening for residents to get engaged. We continue to focus on not only through our economic development programs and incentive-based programs that you've heard quite a bit about through Mr. Gracia over the last couple months, but in our own capital spend in supporting MLBEs. So just reporting out there where we are at through the second quarter of fiscal year 23, and continue to hope to increase that figure. But it is a very important economic development tool for us, and we continue to be transparent about how we are doing in that regard. Also wanted to highlight the work of the Smart Zone. So that continues to be a very significant engine in supporting new businesses, and you can see a lot of job creation at good paying jobs in that regard. Continued things that we have accomplished in the first half of the year. I mentioned the Affordable Housing Fund Board RFP processes that are underway. The commission updated a real estate disposition policy, so we are continuing to put properties on the market that have come to the city or through the state land bank process, focusing on housing and affordable housing. And so you continue to see opportunities throughout the year in front of the commission to leverage those properties to accomplish those goals. We did successfully bring to the commission just in the last couple of weeks the $9 million state placemaking awards, the RAP grants, and that money was able to fill some gaps in some very important housing projects we'll talk more about later. Art Prize, very exciting development of Art Prize 2.0, and as you can see, some other events throughout the year. Here's our metrics for EPA. There's more red on this screen than we'd like to see, but these are not all measures that we 100% control. So these are things that we try to influence through our programs, but we can't always control it. I do want to focus in particular on the number of new affordable dwelling units. If you see, that's the second to the bottom data point. You'll see that for calendar year 22, We've generated, we believe there were 53 units that came online. That's significantly below our target and significantly below the need that we know exists. We're just kind of digesting what all of the contributing factors to that might be, but I'm not going to surprise any of you when I say that part of that is inflation and the gaps that it created in a number of projects that had to then go through second and third rounds of funding, including city RAP grant awards were brought to bear on some of those gaps, and we expect the Affordable Housing Fund Board and CD processes to also fill gaps for some of those projects. So unfortunately, some of those affordable housing projects were significantly delayed by the continued impact of supply chain and inflation. We do believe that there's about 150 units we can expect to come on board in calendar year 23, and we'll continue to try to accelerate those, and about 1,000 affordable units in somewhere in the pipeline of development. So we will continue to focus on that, but I did want to call that to your attention.
Okay, the third priority in the strategic plan is engaged and connected community. Want to acknowledge Mr. David Green, our Office of Communications, as well as Ms. Stout from our Office of Equity and Engagement, who lead primarily the work in this area. With respect to the commitments that were made under communication, doing some work around a new Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, request process and tracking. You have seen most recently from Mr. Agracia the communications plan work being done for the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan. We continue to work on language access, and as well in our assessor's office, working to support communication and increasing awareness in the community of our principal and resident exemption, particularly for those living in poverty or those that are disabled veterans, which have exemptions that are available to them. Some work around cable television equipment, as well as supporting broadband activity. Other commitments under engaged and connected community, our second objective is resident voice and community engagement. Of course, you've been hearing about the work to implement the participatory budgeting Grand Rapids process, as well as funding for neighborhood organizations, the community master plan that was already mentioned with the community engagement happening there. The Office of Oversight and Public Accountability has been doing quite a bit and committed in this fiscal year to increase engagement with a special focus on our immigrant and refugee communities. You'll be hearing more about the Grand Rapids Neighborhood Summit. It is scheduled for May 20th, so please do mark that on your on your calendar. Some work with National Civic League and a couple of others here that you can see that will continue with respect to Neighborhood Match Fund. In terms of being a responsive government, and so how are we utilizing and incorporating the feedback that we have received through our community engagement processes? I'm really looking here to explore a biannual community survey, which we've started to do, and so continuing to offer that, and then continuing to create a supportive digital and online engagement system. So again, some accomplishments from the first 6 months of the year. Over 1,700 residents did participate in the voting for participatory budgeting, and there was an update from Mr. Matthews about that during this time frame. We are in the process. We have begun drafting and releasing the requests for proposals, and that first round is currently out now. Worked on and finalized some internal media training to ensure that all of our staff are well prepared to respond to those many inquiries that we get. The Parks Department has been doing a fantastic job engaging the public, over 700 residents that participated in their planning meetings and design processes. As I mentioned, the Neighborhood Summit, that has been moved to a location this year to be in connection with our GRCC partner and the Public Works Academy to help increase attendance access. And then, as I previously mentioned a while ago, but Water has really done some great work in terms of engagement here with the Public Works Camp. 71 students were able to participate in a field trip to our wastewater and our water filtration plant and have been given an orientation to careers in the public works field. We have conducted some integrated community engagement process, of course, during our 2022 Commission Night Out, which was very well received and successful in the fall of last year, and something City Manager has helped shared that we'll continue to do across calendar year 2023. And then also looking to distribute the funds, and currently have distributed just shy of $140,000 through the Neighborhood Match Fund. A slight little more in-depth update with respect to participatory budgeting. As mentioned, the first round of the request for proposals has been issued and is out. Looking to release those proposals in 3 different phases or tranches on a 45 to 60-day cycle from the release to commission approval of those items. A partnership with the Urban Core Collective, UCC, is in process to provide pre-bid training to interested community organizations. And so here, the initial RFP release, they included 3 items from that PB process. The first was a reading initiative for violence reduction. The second was services for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. And the third was for Citizen Advocacy Skills Academy. With respect to the metrics, again, just a few to highlight for you. This is one of the first times, and I want to thank the clerk's office for tracking this and being able to report on the diversity with respect to participants on the many boards and commissions that we have. I don't have the exact number, but I know that I think it's well over 40 that we have. So working to track in alignment with our commitment around reflecting our community. And so with respect to the fiscal year 23 mid-year column that you can see, this metric is reported out on the time frame of calendar year 2022. So 32.5% of those members on our boards and commissions self-identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. However, that we are about 22% is the variance with respect to our community, which is not meeting our target that has been established of having less than 10% of a variance between diversity serving on our boards and commissions and that which is the demographics of our community. So moving on to the health and environment section. Here are some of the commitments that we made in the fiscal year 2023 budget, specifically with respect to carbon emissions and the climate adaptation, continuing to implement our equitable, healthy, and zero carbon building initiative, as well as work that we're doing around climate planning. There are a few slides going into a bit more detail on that, as well as the work we're doing to achieve our own municipal carbon reduction goals. And also for green space and recreation, our Parks Department and our Forestry Department are continuing to work on capital improvements that have been identified in this fiscal year for Martin Luther King Park Lodge, Garfield Park, Richmond Park, the Otsego Drain Basin, Ottawa Hills Park, and Veterans Park. Of course, continuing on that commitment to increase the grade level of our parks maintenance, as well as a number of the offerings that are provided for free summer camps and youth engagement. Moving to water, sewer, and stormwater, the lead service line replacement program is a very big program that our water department has been leading and continuing, exploring and assisting Cascade in terms of helping them with respect to the PFAS exposure that has happened in that community and bringing them onto the city's water and sewer services to help alleviate that. Continued improvement at our WRF, Water Resource Recovery Facility, other water departments. Hopefully you're aware of our water quality visualization. I always appreciate Ms. Stout refers to it as our weather ball on the river that has been put in place and will help track any contaminants on a real-time manner, and that's a partnership with engineering and those that are working on the river project. Stormwater continues, as well as a few others there. Materials management, you'll hear a little bit more of an update from Mr. Hurt with respect to what's happening there, but in addition to that, we have a recycling pilot partnership with our Grand Rapids Housing Commission properties, and that's something taking place. I believe now they successfully have their recycling education coordinator on staff. That person is likely just getting up to speed, but you'll be hearing more about that. And then with respect to health disparities here, our continued work around brownfields and helping to revitalize and clean up those brownfields for economic development. Of course, the lead hazard control program and the work that you've been hearing from Ms. Bohach around addressing lead paint in homes and continuation with our homeless outreach team. So highlighting some of the performance to date, you'll hear a little bit more in a few slides here about the climate change component, so I'll pass over that, but I did want to highlight that our biodigester has been producing natural gas and selling, RNG there is renewable natural gas to DTE, and that process has helped to reduce the overall amount of processed sludge volume that is generated by 40%, which is very expensive for the city to then pay to have landfilled. So that is helping in terms of reducing costs with respect to our historic process of landfilling that sludge through that biodigester process. The LED street light conversion continues to take place with estimated completion now in this calendar year. That was something we had hoped to finalize by the end of last year, but as Ms. Behrens was citing to a lot of the market disruptions that have been taking place, that is something that has impacted our LED street lighting conversion as well. Great work again by Water Department. 693 lead service lines have been successfully managed and taken out year to date. 30% of that has been focused in the neighborhoods of focus. Lions Square, the state permit approval and the Rosa Parks Circle has reopened, and Veterans Park, that construction contract has been awarded. If you haven't heard about the Gear Library, that's a really phenomenal new program that is taking place to help expand winter recreation and equipment and other outdoor equipment to be able to provide those to people who may want to experience and rent some of that equipment to get outside and enjoy the wonderful outdoors that we have here. And our Parks Department is continuing to seek funding opportunities for Martin Luther Park and the Roosevelt Park Lodge renovations. So just a little bit more detail. City Manager Washington asked that I provide a little bit of an update from our November Commission workshop with respect to the continued work around climate change, this really being a year of action for calendar year 2023. So we did finalize at that November time period, and City Manager approved a community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, science-based target for our community. So that's 62.8% per capita, and that is a reduction that is established for 2030 in comparison to our 2019 emissions inventory, which has been finalized. And so that is something that the community has been asking for, and this was something that was just approved by City Manager and is in addition to our own municipal-based target that we have, which is much more aggressive and cutting edge with respect to municipal operations. And that's been in place for about a year and a half now. That's an 85% reduction by 2030. So we have a lot of city departments that are collaborating on work to bring to fruition and create a plan for achieving that municipal goal, and that's something that we're doing across the city over the next couple of years. Continuing to do work on the Butterworth landfill solar opportunities, knowing that that's a key priority for many here, and so we hopefully should shortly be having another update to come back with respect to some continued work that we're doing not only for the landfill, but also looking at some of our other properties as well. And then just looking at some additional tools to help us track these 200 facilities and all of the emissions that are being generated from our own facilities. Another area that we've really focused on and launched, and I want to acknowledge my team member, Ms. Wilkinson, on our team and Ms. Spiller for doing a phenomenal job on getting out some additional resources and education and promotion around climate change and the work that we're doing. We do have monthly staff updates now that are going out to all staff, as well as a public e-newsletter that has been in place for a year. We have over 650 recipients and have had a very successful open rate with a lot of people engaging and providing compliments on that newsletter. So a way that we are sharing information about all of the work related to climate change from all of our departments across the city. If you're not already signed up, there is a link, and I encourage you to sign up so that you can receive that. We do have a new Climate Page website, so please check that out. And we have developed a 4-part climate change training series, very high level, to help our community be speaking the same language and have the same base information with respect to climate change and how it's impacting our community here and the type of work that we're looking to do. The first session has been launched and is available for city staff. Much appreciation to Human Resources for working with us on that. And we will be making those available for free to the community as well. Here you can see the topics that will be included, but Climate Change 101 is the first that has gone out. And then we are very much focusing and in partnership with Ms. Jennifer Van Horsen and our innovation office, and focusing on our staff innovation challenge for this calendar year will be around climate change. I won't go over all the detail on this slide. Hopefully some of you are aware that we've been talking about doing a climate action and adaptation plan, which is referred to as a CAP for short. There's a link to a timeline here that you will see over this calendar year and into next calendar year. It was very intentional to align this plan with our community master plan, knowing that climate change is an important topic that has come up in the context of that plan and leveraging community engagement and not wanting to over-engage community. So working in partnership with that process as well as plenty of our other departments. We have launched our first CAT team. In the environmental world, we have a lot of acronyms, but CAT is short for Climate Action Team. And these are diverse teams across our community to be focusing on the areas where we are generating the most greenhouse gas emissions in our community. So how are we help bringing down those emissions? We successfully in February, launched one focused on commercial buildings. We'll be working with the Mobile GR Commission to launch one on transportation, residential. We have our own municipal, although we're only responsible for about 3% of total community-wide emissions. We want to lead by example and help demonstrate how this work can be successfully achieved. So continuing that work, we'll be looking at whether we'll be launching one for industry as well. And then we're doing a climate vulnerable, both residential and commercial are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our community, and knowing that we have opportunity to help from a financial sustainability perspective as well as the environmental and social components when we think about our buildings. And so we've made a commitment to work with community and to co-create some recommendations to bring to city manager, and then ultimately those that would be appropriate to come to the city commission on how we can equitably bring down those carbon emissions within the building sector. And here you can see we have a very diverse group of strategic partners that include Urban Core Collective that has served as our diversity partner, as well as a number of others that are serving with us, and really want to highlight that this is a big collaborative effort with a number of other city departments, including community development, code compliance, building inspections, economic development, and planning as well. So I mentioned the others. The last part here, just wanted to highlight, is that we did receive, in partnership with community development, the MSHDA My Hope grant, which has earmarked $125,000 specifically for the EH0 work, where we have identified the South, where's Captain Trigg, right? South Dice Zone, or sorry, but yes, now no, sorry, Williams. So I wanted to make sure I was titling. I think I had used the wrong term in the past. The South Dice Zone, we wanted to align with the collective action work that the city is more broadly doing. And so we did a lot of evaluation and have aligned and are going to be looking to invest this money in about 5, maybe more, but 5 homes to help provide wraparound services to bring down utility costs, to bring down housing costs, to address health issues such as asthma or perhaps lead-based paint and some other areas, and ultimately to help reduce carbon emissions within those houses as well. And that'll be focused in that DICE area, and that's starting to launch. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over and ask Mr. Hurt to come up and walk through materials management.
Good morning. Real brief, just want to give you a quick update on materials management as it relates to health and environment. As you heard back in November, we've kicked off a rate study, which is going to cover all of our material management fees, not only tipping fees, but bulk, appliances, all those things that we cover in terms of fees. That is underway. You're going to see more about that in the coming weeks and months. Some of the alternatives that we're going to be looking at in terms of collection and service delivery models, how are we become more fiscally sustainable? How do we become more environmentally sustainable? And how do we become more infrastructure sustainable? What I mean by that, if you remember, we had an operational assessment done a couple of years ago, and one of the things that the consultant highlighted was the number of trucks that are going down our roads. I know Commissioner O'Connor, we've talked about this a little bit. We're not the only provider in the city. So in other words, residents, it's a free market. They have a choice of which hauler they wish to have. They could have 3 or 4 trucks going down the same street every week. So this is one of the things that we're going to be looking at. We've talked a little bit about the sustainable business part that the county is working on down by the landfill. And what is the impact on the city? That's still not known, but we are anticipating that there could be some projected cost increases, particularly if we have to bring our material down to Hunter Street, where we're taking it over to Market Avenue, over to the waste energy. Increasing costs for service provisions. We've talked about the refuse millage a number of different times. We're levying not the full amount. That's currently covering a number of different services. It does not cover the Pay It program. So as part of that rate study that we're engaging in, it's going to provide some really good information for us in terms of what should we be charging for tips on our program. What other things could we look at in terms of funding? We've done some work in terms of corridor cleaning. You're going to see more about that in the future. We've done some on Monroe Center. We've done some on Division. We've done some on Burton. And how does that impact some of those in terms of the millage? So you'll hear more about that. That'll be coming up in the coming weeks and months.
This is my last slide. So just quick high level, a couple of these that I'll point out, super excited. The top one, our percentage of renewable electricity, that has bumped up to 43.4% of the electricity supplying municipal operations. At this point in time, we have a target to reach that by fiscal year 25. That it has to do with bringing on our Lake Michigan filtration plant project, as well as our biodigester. You can see here tracking the number of lead service line replacements, working to try to achieve those targets each year to stay in alignment with our state requirements. And then really just looking at, you can see one of the new ones we're tracking and sharing the number of homes that have been made lead safe that are happening, and then just also sharing those HOT metrics that we've shared in the past with respect to the work that's being done by the HOT team.
All right, so there's always more information than we want to share than we really have time for. So I'm going to cruise through mobility, and then we'll pause for some questions. So again, just reminding the commission of those specific commitments above and beyond our day-to-day operations that we included in the budget for fiscal year 23. As you would expect, safety is the sort of foundational piece of all of our mobility services, so you see that theme throughout. I'll hit some of these our progress on some of these other priorities in the next couple slides. So I did want to highlight that we have, again, with that safety theme, focused on increasing pedestrian crossing safety facilities, so the kind of flashing beacons and other things that can make some of those crossings safer for our public, and you've seen some of that in and around City Hall, where we've done that between DeVos Place and City Hall. We also continue on traffic calming. So we all know that one of the number one things that we could do for safety is have people pay attention while they're driving and drive at or below the speed limit. But in Michigan, that is a tough sell. So we continue to do some traffic calming techniques as well, both permanent and piloting different kinds of techniques or interim measures while we can actually get to that permanent solution from both a time and budget standpoint. And we continue to fulfill the commitment to the voters on that Vital Streets pavement condition metric. A couple things the commission has heard about lately, so I won't belabor, but we are reimagining DASH. So DASH 3.0 will be unveiled in the spring with a new route with buses running in both directions to better serve sort of today's user and today's users' expectations. We're excited about that, and we'll continue to scale that up with our partners at the Rapid. We continue to install additional bus shelters and think about the use of curb space. So again, modern expectations about curb space covers everything from car share and drop off and loading to a social zone program. So a little bit different parklet idea for the use of the curb space that we continue to work on. And then I do want to highlight just one issue that we will be engaging Mobile GR Commission on and expect to be talking to the commission about as the months go on. So this is a theme that you're hearing in several of our enterprise funds, but thinking about the sustainability of our parking infrastructure and how parking rates play into our ability to maintain and operate those facilities at the level expected. So we will be engaging Mobile GR, thinking about where our parking rates stand now vis-a-vis the market, but also thinking about balancing that question with some of the economic development objectives that our parking supply has been key in helping us to leverage. So that's a conversation that will begin this spring, and we'll continue to work and talk to the commission about. And then just a couple, there are a lot of metrics here, and we're not gonna be able to go through all of them, but just again, with the safety impacts, we continue to monitor and measure serious injuries in our facilities, and work to reduce the number of those incidents. So we are seeing a reduction. We haven't quite met our target. You'll see that on the first line there. We are seeing reductions year over year, but we are trying to push for even greater reductions in that metric year over year. There's a number of measures there about our attempts to push people out of their cars to other forms of mobility. So you've got some measures there about how we're doing with micromobility, e-bikes, Dash, ridership, et cetera. So we continue to measure those things. Oh, so with that, before we get to Safe Community, we'll stop for questions on any of the other outcome areas that you may have.
All right, thank you. Okay, commissioners, I think just to try to keep this a little organized, what I'd like to do is maybe take each section. So why don't we go through each section separately? So let's see if you have any questions on the section related to government excellence, and then we'll move to economic prosperity, and then engaged community, and then we'll end with mobility. So that would be, let me see, government excellence would be the first 12 slides. So slide 9 to 12. Let's see if there are questions or comments related to those items. I'll start. I have a few. I'm curious, and maybe this is not for today, but if City Manager, you can get back to me on this. I'm wondering if we can get a full update on the increase in MLBE, both the number we have at the city as well as spend each year. So I'd like a little more detail on that. I know a lot of energy has gone into that. And then I'm curious with the facilities master plan, when that is anticipated to be done. I feel like we've been talking about that for quite some time.
Yeah, we can certainly get you the MLB information. I think Mr. Gracia just recently reported on some of that information. Regarding the facility master plan, I think we are a year away from having the final report. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've spent the last few months doing scoping, seeing by facility how far we want to get into, or do more of a high-level flyover. So classifying facility, stuff like that for level of review. But overall, we're just ending that. We're going to start sending the team out to the facilities to do the assessments, and we're hoping by late fall, early winter next year to have a report. So.
Okay. All right, commissioners. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Mine is a quick one, too, that I feel like we've talked about quite a bit, the legislative management system software. I'm very interested to see, what are those upgrades? Are we mostly going to see them internal? Will that be more focused externally on individuals to be able to access things more easily? So I kept asking Joel, city clerk, about it last year.
Mr. Canfield's prepared to address that question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Promptly prepared to do it.
Yes. So there will be both internal and external changes and improvements. And so to highlight a few of the external related improvements, there will be more seamless embedding of the information in our website versus kind of linking off to what feels like a separate tool. There will also be online sign up available for public comments and better integration of web video streaming within agenda items so that a person who is interested in an item can later on go view the item and actually click on the video and start the video at that portion of the conversation rather than kind of hunting for it in the stream. So those are the key public facing improvements.
Great, thank you. Other questions on this section around government excellence?
I got notes all over the place, so hopefully I'll stay in the right category. Just stop me if I'm going too fast. But just to tag back on the conversation about MLBEs, and I know there has been some improvement on it, but I also recognize that a lot of that is within business that happens within the city, but we know that when it comes to private businesses, we can't really force them to use MLBEs, but is there other ways that we can be a little more persistent in really encouraging them to utilize more of the MLBEs. I know a lot of those organizations or those smaller businesses don't feel like they can fit within that space, or they don't feel like they're actually going to be used for some of the work that is out there. So it would be interesting to see how we could be creative in working with some of these other private companies that want to do business with the city, and encouraging them even more, or finding some really creative ways to encourage them to utilize these businesses.
Right after the mayor asked her question earlier, I just remembered the number. It seems like several years ago, about 4 years ago, Office of Equity and Engagement shared with me we had about 25, 27 MLBEs, and we have over 90 now. So we increased the number, and part of that is to increase the potential pool internally. But to your point about contract opportunities outside of the city of Grand Rapids, we will give that further thought. I think Ms. Claren also has some insight on our own purchasing program.
Sure. Regarding the MLBE question, we did, and this was in the comptroller's annual report as well. There was a page on I believe it was like top 20 vendors, and then there was a footnote at the bottom. In fiscal year 22, we spent $9.8 million went towards MLBE vendors, and then even on that list, it points out a few of them have grown enough to be in among our top 20 vendors. As far as the purchasing policies, we do offer a bid discount program. We also work with all of our neighboring municipalities. I know Kent County has a program, the school district, and a lot of those were actually built off of what we originally did with the city's bid discount program. So they're very similar, but I know, we pool a lot of the municipalities to kind of follow and offer that.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Knight, did you have additional questions?
I'm interested, and I think I got some of this information, but not probably totally, I guess, what I was looking for, but interested in seeing more of the detail on the projects that happen in the neighborhoods of focus, not just the projects, but what was some of the community response to those projects, and if they were actually meeting the intended goal of actually being implemented. And then I think I was looking at the work with the different art projects that are going on across the city, and interested in Art Prize and how that's actually going to function, and how they're going to reach out outside of downtown to really be inclusive of some of the other communities. I know they tried to do that maybe in the past, but how are they really pushing forward to into?
So let's talk about that in a second. Let me see if there's any other questions related to the first section around government excellence, and then we can move on to that section. So commissioners, are there any other questions you have on the first section around government excellence? So that would be slides 9 through 12, Commissioner?
Just really a comment, Mayor. I think in our fiscal committee today, we talked about some of the different policy pieces as we get ready for the budget season. I do think the 61st District Court piece, I'm not suggesting we talk about that today, but that might be a good briefing for this body to get some of that background from just the past years of our budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good idea. And then it may also be helpful to add a map of our neighborhoods of focus. I know we know where those are in those census tracts, but I'm not sure everyone does. So as we talk about investments in neighborhoods of focus, we should probably include a map just so people are clear about that. All right, so I think we're good with that section. So let's move then to the economic prosperity and affordability. So this would be slides 14 through, let me get this straight,
17.
Through 17. So 14 through 17, and I'll start down here with Commissioner Knight, since I think a couple of your questions were related to this section.
Well, I already asked the one about the MLBEs, that piece in there. Art Prize was another piece. Like I said, I remember in the past that they had reached out and tried to do some work in other communities, but how is that actually going to be structured? What is if they have an advisory board, how diverse is that and who does that consist of? Are there people that are embedded in the arts community and the work in the city actually a part of that work so that they can speak to and then from those communities and help to really develop this work across the community, not just downtown, but within the city as a whole, so everybody can participate in that space.
Yeah, thanks. City Manager, you want to speak to this? I know a lot of it is still in the works, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We are still waiting on the proposed activation plan for Art Prize. I think there's a lot of work that's still in planning, but there has been efforts, as you recognize in the past, to expand the footprint outside of the downtown boundaries, and I think that is still part of the discussion. But I think the focus, at least from the dais here, has been when we do it outside of downtown boundaries, we want to be intentional around the business corridors in some of the neighborhoods. And we talked about that specifically, for example, within the third ward, because and I think in the past, the activation outside of downtown have primarily been in neighborhood parks, which is good, and it creates more placemaking. But we'd like to see more direct economic impact to some of the businesses that are outside of the downtown, just as the businesses in downtown receive that benefit. The other aspect in terms of inclusion, I think, now that we have that it's not just the nonprofit that's leading Art Prize, but it's Art Prize 2.0 that is a collaborative effort with the city, Kendall, College of Art and Design, Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc., and want to make sure I'm not missing anyone, Mayor. But I think just that in itself is helping with hearing different perspectives from other people. And so I think what we will do is continue to build upon the success of the past, and it will be done with a different platform since we have some public entities that are involved.
Yeah, and as we get more updates on that, we'll make sure that this full body is abreast of those. So I'll come down here to Commissioner Moody, and then over here, do y'all have any questions? I'll go to Commissioner Isasi after that. Commissioner Moody?
Yeah, thank you for this briefing. I think it's very important that we continue to hear where we're progressing at and the things that we need to improve on. I appreciate on page 14, you talked about small business support in reference to the revolving funds for African-American businesses. I just need to know, have you decided on what that budget limit would be?
So two things in response to that. One is the $50,000 contract with the Urban League is to establish sort of a supportive organization specifically for Black-owned business. So that budget and scope has been set, and that's really to support the formation of that organization and put it into a place where it's sustainable. The Small Business Revolving Loan Fund is currently budgeted at $1.5 million. We are working right now on rethinking the best use of those funds, candidly speaking. So,
but that was my next question: how are you going to use that money?
Right. So we have found
spending that money.
Yeah, we have found through other small business support programs with the ARPA funds that the strings attached to the ARPA dollars and the record keeping and reporting that's required has meant we've been challenged to find businesses that are able to use that money. So we are putting together some alternative uses for the commission to consider, potentially looking at housing and affordable housing as also an economic development issue now. We are hearing from our employers. So we will be back to you to think about that, but it may pivot to that sort of use.
Okay, I can find you some business that we can use to spend that money.
We'll touch base with you outside this meeting as well.
I would definitely appreciate that. But thank you. It's not the third ward equity fund. We want more money.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll go down here to Commissioner Isasi and then Commissioner Robbins. Commissioner?
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. So one of the things that I wanted to, I think this was last week or the week before, was that the equity framework for the river project, I think was released last week. So if folks haven't looked at that, I would suggest that that would be a good one to do. I know I saw some of the consultants downtown last week after some of our bodies. I think, thanks for the update about the revolving loan fund. I don't know where Jeremiah is, but I was like glad to see it in the presentation because this was something that we talked about last year. I would also be interested if corridor improvement authorities are a part of that discussion, right? Because I think a lot of them are very much connected to those corridors that city manager talked about activating and have, I think, structures where, I don't know the differences of the money, but I would agree with the complexity of some of those pieces. We've seen that in the CDFI world. Will we be getting an update about, Mayor, I know you talked at the last meeting about perhaps in the supplemental some additional RAP funding that could be available. So I don't know if that is something that Karen might talk about, but I'm interested in that. And then I just want to say thank you for, I think the whole point about the metrics is certainly to stand up here and it feels good to see the work that is done and to celebrate the work. I want to also just appreciate the transparency as we talk about the number of dwelling units and highlighting that. I think we're not running away from it. We have to use that data, understand we're in this, different economy and market. What are those things that we can pull upon? And so I hope that those who are watching, transparency, we're very committed to that and understanding what are those challenges. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you asking the question about the RAP. That was on my list as well. I'm curious, the $9 million that we received, how quickly those dollars are going to be out the door to those projects that qualified and that were identified. And then I know that I believe 75 million additional dollars were allocated to RAP in this last supplemental. Is that right? Was it 75 million? Or was it 100 million? It was 100 million. So I'm really curious about that as well. So, Ms. Behrens, you want to speak to that or have somebody come up and help you?
I will let you know that with respect to the $9 million that the commission just approved the awards for, we can get back to you on the details of exactly how the reimbursement there will work, how quickly we expect those to get out the door. We are seeing some of those same projects coming through the Affordable Housing Fund Board process as well, so we can talk about that moving forward. And then I do believe that the legislative update will include a conversation about how we are supporting the projects within the city of Grand Rapids seeking that additional funding as well.
And I'm sure we're tracking as well. I know some of those projects applied for funds for missing middle funds. Again, those were state allocations. And then there's gap financing available for LIHTC as well. And I know they're still working on eligibility for that, but the intent was to have that be a pass-through, get out the door really quickly. So it'd be nice to look at all of the different projects in the city. I know there was probably about a $32 million gap. Where are we able to fit RAP funds, missing middle, and then the LIHTC gap funding?
We do have that list. Yes. We do have. Mayor, if I could go back to, I heard two comments, both from Commissioner Moody and Commissioner Sassi, about the revolving loan fund, and Ms. Behrens' very high level indicated complexity, but if I want to take just a minute to unwrap it just a little bit more. My understanding, the reason why the county is able to use ARPA funding for a revolving loan fund for housing is because that is a stated permitted use within the ARPA guidelines. When we envision using ARPA funding for businesses, that was an aspirational use, and we didn't have the clarity that we have now. But apparently, the same flexibility that is being allowed for housing utilization revolving loan fund is not being extended to businesses for the purposes of just business continuity or without having a housing focus. Essentially, that is what I understand some of the complexity is around. And so because of that, we'll have to come back and have a discussion how to utilize the $1.5 million in a way that's consistent with ARPA guidelines. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sassi, did you have a follow-up? No? Okay. Yeah, me too. It's complicated to put all these pieces together. Commissioner Robbins?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to piggyback off Commissioner Sassi. I'm a big numbers guy, so I appreciate the transparency and just being able to see all of this, both the progress and the targets. And I think that that's just really important for our informed decision making, but also just to educate the public on what exactly is going on. I do just have one really quick question about the MLB registration process, I guess. are there specific barriers or feedback you're hearing from people who have applied and maybe didn't, meet the criteria? I'm just trying to figure out in my mind how we can maximize the number of those that we have as options.
Yeah, I'm going to phone a friend for the
Right.
barriers, but I will say that we do have many resources in place to try to overcome those barriers, but with details of what those might be, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stout.
Yeah.
Yes, we have, and we brought before this body, one of the solutions we had was to contract with someone for mentoring and actually helping them with accounting, because we have to assess, their revenues. And so we've come alongside them to offer those additional technical supports through that contract. So that is one example of how we've been working through that. And then really just having really excellent customer service with our business developer, Alvin Hills. So that's kind of it. It's just there's a lot of steps, and so we need someone to kind of walk them through it and support.
Thanks. All right, Commissioners, any other questions on this section? And if not, I'll move to the next section around engaged communities, and this would be pages 18 through 23. So 18 through 23. I'll go ahead, Commissioner. Go ahead. I was looking at my own scribbles. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to say, appreciate the information about the FOIA request process. Our appeals board has received, from what I can tell, record appeals. We had 3 last year, I think, and there may have had one that was canceled this year. But I do think one of the things that we have seen through the appeals process is sometimes they're doing that, but they really want, I shouldn't say always, sometimes there has been instances where they probably need to go to internal affairs, they maybe need to go to OPA, they might need to go to code compliance. And so as we look at that process, I just wanted to give that feedback from our appeals board that people could avoid, and it can be very costly because we know that especially with the video pieces, there's a lot of time and energy that needs to be done. I know we've shifted some resources, right, city manager, contractually to help with that video production. But I did want to share that perspective from the FOIA. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Very good point.
And then we can ask the chief when he comes later to address some of the resource issues around FOIAs in the police department as well.
Yeah. And again, Commissioners, I encourage you, if you have additional information you want after this presentation or briefing, just send the questions to City Manager. I'm curious if we can share additional information, not just on what we're doing internally around our work more closely with the immigrant and refugee communities, but also our partnership with the county around the welcoming plan work. It'd be nice to get an update on that. I know that we are, Ms. Stout is actively involved as are other members of our city. But it would be nice to just have this body really aware of all of the work that's happening, both in our city as well as throughout the county.
And Mayor, in addition, I think we have a planned presentation from our oversight office that's scheduled for next month to specifically go in detail about the work that he and Ms. Stout have been doing collectively around the immigrant refugee community.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So you can just know that that's a priority, and if it's already planned to be brought before this body, I'm fine with that. Okay. All right, Commissioners, any other questions from pages 18 to 23? Commissioner Perdue?
Hi. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the strategies around supporting neighborhood organizations, whether that's our actual neighborhood associations or other ones within community. I understand that our funding relationship in many ways are centered around public safety, but I think those associations, those organizations are really also a hub for communication, for outreach, for neighborhood support, connectivity, belonging, all those good things. And I know sometimes we have restrictions in our dollars in terms of what we can help folks support, particularly when it's a pass-through. So I was curious to hear more about what is the strategy around how do we support those neighborhood organizations and really the breadth of services and connectivity they can provide. Before
before staff comments, I just wanted to lift the work that I think this body approved at the last commission meeting in terms of empowering the neighborhood associations to assist us with more community voice and awareness around the master plan. So that was additional unappropriated funding that was approved both for neighborhood associations, but also the work that I believe a subcommittee of this body continues to do around the community development block grant funding and looking at the various ways that we utilize neighborhood associations. Last year, there was a increase in the amount of funds that were allocated to neighborhood associations for that work. And so I think what the actions that you took last week with the additional appropriations to the neighborhood association for the master plan was work that was reflective of this goal. Now, obviously, there's a lot more other things that are being planned and contemplated, and I would ask the staff if there's anything that we could share at this point to share during the mid-year. If not, we can come back.
Sure, I think we could come back with more detail, and I see Ms. Bohach coming up, but there are some limitations, as you point out, in terms of the money that we have available to directly underwrite some of the work that the neighborhood associations do. We do continue to work with capacity building for the neighborhood associations, even as we maybe cannot necessarily fund all of their operations. So I know that Ms. Stout, for example, has made diversity and equity and inclusion training something that neighborhood associations can make themselves aware, can opt into, and we also continue to work with them through the community master planning process, and we hope that does expand some of their connections and with each other. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Bohach.
Good morning. So I'll just add to that, because I think you're referring to the community development block grant funds that we allocate on an annual basis to neighborhood associations. And we provide those resources in sort of two pots of funding. And one is for more general community organizing and related to civic engagement and education and getting residents involved and engaged in their communities. And then the other part of that is for crime prevention, and we've done that for many years. Neighborhood associations have the ability to identify specifically what it is they want to do with those resources, as long as they fall within those two parameters. And so we look for some very high-level outcomes, and a lot of the activities that they're doing fall into one of those two buckets. But again, I know that neighborhoods would like to have funding that's just more loose in terms of their ability to determine whether they want to do crime prevention or just the neighborhood engagement pieces of that, or I should say civic engagement pieces. And right now, to do that, you'd be giving up a piece of those resources, the way that that's put into play. We have funding recommendations that will be coming forward to you on March 14th for all of our funding, not just for neighborhood associations. And City Manager Washington indicated that there was an increase last year. We had one-time funding, and so neighborhood associations were provided not only additional funds for that component to make sure that they were engaged with the master plan process, but also had additional crime prevention dollars as well.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. And I thinking back to when I was a commissioner, I think the hope is that our neighborhood associations, who are nonprofit organizations, could rely on diversified funding and have funding from the city, but then also, as you know, many of them have fundraising events and are able to secure private dollars as well. In addition, they apply sometimes for the neighborhood match funds and are actively engaged in some of our other efforts, even around SAFE.
Yeah. I think, I'd just like to state the elephant in my room, at least, is that we know that all neighborhood associations are not situated equally or equitably. I think about, just a mile away from each other, we have Baxter Neighborhood Association in Easttown, right? Though they are very differently resourced, they have very different histories. And while all that is not the responsibility of the city to address and to fix, I think it's something that we should keep in mind and design around. How do we get more of our neighborhood associations, particularly in neighborhoods like Baxter, where the data isn't always positive in terms of outcomes and crimes and so on and so forth. How do we bolster and support them and come alongside them, in the words of Mr. Stout? I think that is a key strategy. If we're going to be successful in our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, we need to really bring in and think about how to resource some of those neighborhood associations differently from leadership perspective, spending. I've gotten feedback where some of those CBD dollars are around public safety. And so what that has meant for a lot of organizations is a ticketing strategy, going around and making sure folks are being very compliance focused as opposed to community connectivity, organizing focus. And so, again, I don't think it's our full role to fix all of that, but really important to keep in mind and to strategize around. And so that is my ask. I know this, I have some catching up to do in terms of conversations over the last 2 to 10 years, probably around some of this stuff. And so if it's appropriate to kind of get downloaded kind of in a meeting format or to bring it to this full body, I want to do my part in understanding some of that evolution, but did feel the need to raise that very real inequity amongst neighborhood associations that then has cascading effects when we rely so much of our community engagement strategies on those neighborhood associations that are inequitably situated.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I know Ms. Stout has actively worked at how do you build capacity, especially in our 3rd ward where we know we need stronger neighborhood associations. So I don't know if you want to speak to that. I know you've been working on that for a couple of years now. And then maybe you and Commissioner Perdue can get together and you can share with her some of that history.
Sure. Sounds fun. Yes, so we have been doing the Neighborhood Leadership Academy for several years where we co-created the curriculum together to get deeper for capacity building. It was DE&I, but it was also around case statements, fundraising, event planning, building relationships with donors because they are separate entities. And so it is important that they have diverse streams, but also community engagement and really leveraging the brilliance and the generosity of everyday residents that give, whether it's $1, $10, or $10,000, right? There's a lot of generosity in the hearts of our residents. So we've been working alongside them for several years now with the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, free training, and then we also will actually give them a contract upon completion to implement strategies. So often we go to conferences or we see a workshop and we're like, that's a great idea. I wish we had resources. And so we, MLK Kellogg Foundation, able to stand up the MLK Park Neighborhood Association as well that serves the northern third of what used to be SENA. So just trying to be really intentional in that space because of the things that you said. And then also working with other organizations that maybe aren't associations, but they're resident-led and resident-focused to kind of make sure that there is more structures in place to lift up resident voice.
Thank you for that, and I'll take you up on that offer. And I should have started by saying, recognizing all of the evolution that I have seen, whether it's the Neighborhood Summit or the Neighborhood Match Fund. I think everything is a both and, right? We've done a lot of work, and how do we continue that in a really meaningful way? So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. It's an excellent point. All right, any final questions on this section? And if not, I'm going to move to health and environment, which is, let's see, pages 25 through 33. So let's go to this next section. I'll start, and maybe I can just get a reminder since I have lots of dates going on in my head lately. Looking at the investment in parks, can you remind me what the timeline is for Plaza Roosevelt and the Roosevelt Park Lodge?
Ooh, I'm going to need to get back to you on that one. I don't have the specific dates in my head. So I will
I'm
find
just
that
looking
and
at
get it to
the
you.
list of MLK, Garfield, Richmond, Otsego Drain Basin, Ottawa Hills, 2 priority projects, especially over in the Roosevelt Park neighborhood, is Plaza Roosevelt and the Roosevelt Park Lodge. So I would like an update on that when we can get it.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions on health and environment 25 through 33? Commissioner Knight?
I thank you for the information around the biodigester. I know that the initial cost of that project was a little more than it was supposed to be. My question, I think, is around, you talked about the carbon or the gas emissions and how you were able to sell that back to DTE. I had a question about, so how much more, I guess I don't know, exactly what the amount is that's being sold to DTE, and if there's possibilities of that being something that can be utilized, not just within the city, but also thinking about the city residents, right? And how to decrease some of their gas costs. and I don't even know if that can happen, but it's just a thought that popped in my head that I think would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'm not sure I can answer that question. We do generate a certain amount of CFMs. I don't want to get all technical with you, but we sell that through a pipeline with an interconnection with DTE. I don't know if we can actually sell it to residents. DTE would have to be the utility that would sell it to the residents.
Yeah.
But we can certainly explore it. Maybe
Well,
Ms.
and
Sutter's got more.
Yeah, maybe Ms. Sutter can. And so how that agreement was set up was a partnership, obviously between the city and DT, and then the Rapid is a partner in that space as well. So much of that is going for the Rapid buses that are currently running on CNG. Now they're able to run on RNG as well. And the process for how that gas is utilized and actually gets into the vehicles, I think is also a kind of a complex step. So Ms. Sutter, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say, so the renewable natural gas, RNG, that is being generated by our biodigester, there are a couple of options to use it, one specifically for residents that I just wanted to highlight. But we are selling it to DTE. They are using it in two ways. One, helping and selling it to the Rapid, as Mayor Bliss said, and we are using it for city fleet purposes as well. So we can use it for our own city fleet as well as for the Rapid buses. And then also DTE is using some of that renewable natural gas where they have created a pilot program allowing residents to purchase essentially zero carbon natural gas for their residential consumption. Now that it comes at a premium cost that a resident has the option to sign up for through DTE, but it is our gas that's going through their program that comes back to the resident for use. And then the other option that we've always known and kept in the back of our mind is the ability to use some of that renewable natural gas to actually power the biodigester and have it used. So there are a multitude of ways in which it can be used that I know that Mr. Hurt and the team, as well as Ms. Claren, have always monitored kind of the financial benefits for those different streams to be using.
Yeah. All right, Commissioners, any other questions in this section? Commissioner Isasi?
Thank you, Mayor. Not necessarily for now, but interested on the recycling pilot, certainly with the Housing Commission, and just as we think about the affordable housing that we've just been talking about, and the housing really at all price points, I think it would behoove us to kind of have this conversation simultaneously, so that, I mean, that's one of the things that I just love about Grand Rapids, that I can have my recycling and, got everybody in my family involved with it. So I'd like more people to be able to do that. So that's one, but we can talk about that later. And then I think, again, in terms of the onboarding, Mayor, we had I think that was a whole update where Mr. Hurt gave some information about just the realities of the rate studies and what are some of the decisions in front of us that we might not have full control over as it relates to materials management. There's some significant implications there. So could we talk about that maybe at a future meeting too?
I think it's probably wise for us to get a briefing and an update on that, as well as an update with DPW and what's happening at the county and the Sustainable Business Park, and our efforts in partnership with our Metro 6. I'll let City Manager and Mr. Hurt follow up on that and maybe get the full commission briefed on that. A full overview from our composting site to how we plan to respond to waste and our partnership with the county. There's some moving parts right now with the county, but I think we can get this body up to speed.
I think, to answer your question, absolutely, Mayor. The reason why I think what I wanted Mr. Hurt to share with us today is there are services that we know, basic services, and refuse is a basic service that we can improve here in our city. There are, in terms of climate action and sustainability, our service improvement level alone won't get that done. But the basics of picking up the trash, and not only curbside, but also rubbish that's along corridors and other, I mean, those are the areas that we want to refocus back on. And some of these, improved services will, the revenue streams that we used in the past or the way that we've allocated for the revenues to fundament require rethinking. And instead of us just doing a add-on, because the tipping structure that we have here in Grand Rapids, how shall I say, it's a very unique way of funding refuse collection, very unique. And it may have, in its time, been well ahead of what other communities are doing, but I don't think it's a common practice. And so the rate study, I think, having both the rate study on what the cost of service should be, as well as the approach to waste management will be very, very helpful. And I think if we can show some improvement in that, that will be something that every resident can appreciate. And it's not like we are not doing what we've been asked, but there's ways to improve it. And so I've heard the conversation, and I'm not saying I'm agreeing with the way it's termed, but I've heard it spoken in terms of the trash equity issue.
We talked about different names.
Yeah, but it definitely needs to. It's worth looking at. So we're happy to come back with that conversation.
I would just say thank you. I think this is where we see the intersecting points of from different neighborhood associations, that corridor cleaning, where just things are just dumped, and people. I don't think it's that. I don't think all the people who are leaving stuff, they want to. It's they're unable to make that economic decision to go and get that, that bulk tag or whatever they might need to do. So I appreciate that conversation. I think there's a lot of hopefully good implications here. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think we're long overdue at looking at just holistically, and I actually think it's really good timing. And James, I'm looking at you. You serve on our advisory committee with DPW. I think the timing is really great because the county's also making changes and investments. And we've talked for a long time about how do we have a more holistic approach? How do we address organics? So timing, I think, is good. All right, Commissioner Moody?
I just want to ask, how are we handling the private haulers with our rates?
I'm going to have to, I think people just go out on the open market, so I don't know that we have any particular influence over the private haulers' rates. Is that correct, James?
Since we don't have any influence over hauler rates, are they using our biodigester?
No.
Good.
We don't influence their rates, but we have an influence to some degree on how the market is set up, the environment for waste collection and what we do. And so I think indirectly, we have an influence on the market competition.
So we'll expect the city manager and Mr. Hurt to provide us with a real overview, holistic view of where we are, what we hope to accomplish through a rate study, what are some areas that we can improve, what are some different options in how we provide refuse, and then an update on what's happening at the county and how we will continue to partner with them. So, yeah, you're welcome. All right, any final questions before I move to mobility, which would be slides 33 through 39? Let's move to mobility, if you have questions on this section. So, all right, I don't see any. Oh, you do, Commissioner Isasi, great. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Naramore and also Captain Trigg and others in the police department. I think, one of the top messages that I get is around speeding in this city. And, I think as we think about holistic public safety, I personally would like our police department to be working on the issues that really need their response. And so, to me, the speeding piece is a collective community. It's that, looking at somebody and saying, don't do that. We had a horrible crash the other day, not very far from my home. And speeding may have been a factor, but actually it was impaired driving. I believe it was impaired driving. And so I just think, I don't know about all of you new commissioners, but I would say this is the number one question that I get And I just really appreciate the quick action, Mr. Naramore, that you've taken. When it's happening in your neighborhood, it's happening on your street, it's the most important thing. So I just appreciate that continued focus. And I think a lot of it is just culture change as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I'll add my thanks to the entire team. And it would be interesting, I don't know, City Manager, if you're planning to give us an update and breakdown from 311 data, but I know based on anecdotally the calls I get in my office, this is probably one of the number one issues that I hear about. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Yes, I have been, that seems to be the annual request, this report 311 data. And we are working on that report. How soon, Mr. Canfield, before we're able to get it? Later this week.
Oh, good. I know I always appreciated it in the past, so I will look forward to that update. Thank you. All right, any final questions on this section, Commissioners, before we move on to our next section around safe community? All right, seeing none. City Manager, do you want to take a 2-minute break and let people use restroom or get something to drink?
Sure.
Commissioners, do you need a quick break? Yes. All right, let's take a quick, just 2 minutes, and then we'll get back in here. So warm up your coffee, use the restroom, and then we're going to come back together.